Live now.
And money will buy almost anything. Scientists are clever. They'll figure the proper design to show the results. And that's the unfortunate thing. It used to not be that way. It used to not be that heavy influence of industry on our research, but now I can't trust anything. I honestly can't. If you take the drug, the risk is reduced by 9 fractures in 10,000 women. That's less than 1 in 1,000 women taking this drug for 3 years. Now, would you buy this drug if you were told the absolute benefit? Absolutely not. But you're lied to. Your doctors are taught to lie to you. The absolute risk of fracture reduction in 4 years is 1.7%. But you know what happens by 7 years? Fracture risk is increased when you take these drugs. But they don't report the 7-year data to the FDA or to anybody else. Now, as far as your question about getting an annual physical, the answer is do not. It is recommended by the American Medical Association, the American College of Preventive Medicine, and so on, to not get annual physical examinations. They do far more good than harm. It is dangerous to look for problems, far more harm than good. It's dangerous to look for problems that will never surface, but they'll become problems if you look for them. If you examine 2,000 men with PSAs, you'll save 1 life, maybe. But you'll diagnose 48 men with prostate cancer that had never known they had it. Yet they will lose their prostate, they'll pee in their pants, and they won't be able to get an erection. This is dangerous looking for problems that don't exist. When your body is sick, you will know, and then you seek medical attention. Annual physical examinations are recommended against getting by every authority that I know. Don't do it. Stay away from physicians. For heart disease and diabetes and colon cancer and breast cancer, if you want to get out of that business, you have to fix the problem. You do not want physicians as your best friends. You don't want your calendar littered with doctor's appointments.
You think doctors work for free? They're in business. So you better go in as a well-informed customer, because you'll be at mercy to them if you don't take that attitude. You ought to go into them like they were used car salesmen. That's about as much respect as they're owed, as used car salesmen. They're going to trick you every time they get a chance. And maybe not intentionally. Maybe they're all well-intentioned. Let's just assume they are. But the amount of misinformation that goes on because of money, because of research paid by the food industries and research paid for 70% of the research that I read in my journals has a funding by an industry.
Hey, folks. Howdy, howdy. Welcome. For those of you who showed up early, you got to watch some clips of Dr. John McDougall discussing health and the challenges of giving good medical advice. And I think it's fitting that we led in with Dr. McDougall because, to me, he represents the very best of medicine, of doctoring, of humanity, for that matter. He wasn't just a doctor, he was a fighter, an advocate, and a truth teller in an industry where that isn't always easy. And for decades, he challenged the medical establishment, calling out unnecessary treatments, exposing conflicts of interest, and pushing back against the profit-driven sickness industry that puts money over patient well-being. But most of all, he gave people hope. Thousands upon thousands of people who had been failed by traditional medicine, they were told they needed drugs for life, that their conditions were irreversible, that their fate was sealed, found a lifeline in Dr. McDougall's work. Through his books, his lectures, his programs, he restored people's health. He gave them back their energy and their mobility and helped them reclaim their lives. And just as importantly, he helped them regain their faith in medicine itself. This is an era when so many doctors are gatekeepers for pharmaceuticals and procedures. Dr. McDougall puts his patients first, and he empowered them with knowledge, encouraged them to take control of their own health, and proved that food is medicine, really in the most profound way. So he's someone we miss every day, but his legacy continues, not just in the hundreds of thousands of lives that he changed, but in the message that we all keep moving forward and spreading. He wasn't just a great doctor, he was a force of nature, and we owe it to him to carry his work into the future. Now, I know that my guest today, Dr. Peter Rogers, feels the same way, and many of you do too, I'm sure, who are watching. So, okay. Welcome, Peter. Good to see you. Can I hear you? Say something.
Yeah. Everything's good.
All right, cool. Maybe, let's see here. Does everybody hear him okay? Let me look at the comments here and people tell us of anything. Yep, it all sounds good. Good. Well, we're doing something different. This is my first live stream. I've figured out the buttons here. Peter recommended a system I'm using. It looks pretty cool. Welcome, everybody, whether you're joining us live or you're watching us later. I'm glad that you're here. And today, as you know, we have the illustrious Dr. Peter Rogers back on the channel. He's here to answer your questions. And there's a lot of questions. Some were emailed in. I got over 30 questions. Some were posted on the video that I made announcing this. And I'm sure we'll get even more while we're live, but we're going to do our best to answer as many as possible. For those who may not know, Dr. Peter Rogers is one of the sharpest medical minds you'll ever encounter. He graduated from Stanford University, where he earned his MD at Northwestern and went on to study at Harvard Medical School. He scored 99% on his board exams, and you literally can't score any higher than that. He wasn't just the top of his class once, he was consistently at the top, proving time and again that he's operating at a level few ever reach. But academic brilliance is really just part of the picture. Dr. Rogers has spent years in medical research and clinical practice, diving into the deepest levels of human physiology to truly understand how the body works and how we can optimize it for lifelong health. Beyond that, like Dr. McDougall, he's a truth seeker. He's built an incredibly loyal following because he cuts through misinformation like a scalpel. He exposes flawed studies and weak arguments and dangerous fads, all while delivering hard science in a way that's clear, logical, and uncompromising. So when it comes to plant-based nutrition and disease prevention and the power of lifestyle medicine, Dr. Rogers is one of the most compelling voices, not just in the vegan community, but in the entire world of health and medicine. So, Dr. Rogers, it's great to have you here. Should we just jump right in and start looking at some of these questions?
Sure.
Let's see. Let me set this up here. I know I can share my screen. Video comments. There it is. So going from the bottom, since these are the people who asked First, it says, Dr. Rogers, is xylitol okay to use in toothpaste in lieu of fluoride?
Well, xylitol is one of those artificial sweeteners. And if you're just using it in toothpaste and you rinse it out of your mouth pretty fast, it's probably not much of a problem. But I think xylitol in general is a bad thing. It's quite prothrombotic. It activates platelets. You'll find there's papers written about it increasing the risk of cardiovascular events. You know, atherosclerosis is a blood clot, and a cardiovascular event means either a heart attack or a stroke. So if you could avoid it, I would preferentially avoid it. And I definitely would not have it in any type of beverage or food.
Great. So here's the next one. Hi, Doc. I know the mantra of no oils, but the science on olive oil seems to be getting better. Thoughts on EVOO?
I laugh because they say the science is getting better. The science doesn't change. It's just the industry is getting better at funding more studies. Okay. There's a lot of papers going back on fat. Okay. You can't win with fat. Okay. Nathan Pritikin was a genius, and he reviewed all the literature on fat, and he came to the conclusion fat is bad. Dr. McDougall also said fat is the biggest toxin, #1 toxin in the Western diet. There was a study by David Blankenthorne with cardiac cath of human coronary arteries, and they fed them different types of fat diets. You could feed them MUFA, that's an olive oil, monounsaturated fatty acid, PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids, or you feed them saturated fat. It didn't matter. What mattered was total fat intake. The more fat the patients ate, the more atherosclerosis they had. And the only way to reverse atherosclerosis is to minimize all forms of fat. So what I'm recommending is no olive oil. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn also, he has the best results of anybody in the world for reversal of coronary artery disease. And he says, no oil, not one drop. Moderation kills. Olive oil has also been shown in the brachial artery tourniquet test, flow-mediated dilation and whatnot, that it impairs blood flow through your arteries. It impairs their ability to vasodilate. They did studies in African green monkeys, which are kind of similar to humans in terms of their vascular disease, atherosclerosis risk factor profile. And they also were shown to have more atherosclerosis in the context of eating olive oil. In addition, olive oil is not that well regulated and standardized such that you often hear about fake, even worse versions. They'll put even, omega-6s or other types of oils in there that are even more predisposed to lipid peroxidation. Like a PUFA has more double bonds, so it's even worse for undergoing lipid peroxidation. But the bottom line is I think you should avoid olive oil. I would recommend not have one drop of it.
All right, great. So the next question, looking for, first, is it okay to consume sugar water, table sugar, when doing endurance exercise? People claim it's pH neutral and doesn't damage teeth. Is this true? Second question, type 1 diabetic, and I eat low-fat, high-carb, plant-based diet and need very little insulin, max 10 units a day. I used to take nearly triple the amount when I didn't eat low-fat. Is very low levels of insulin safe for the body? I am lean and my blood sugar is pretty well controlled. So that's two questions.
Yeah, there's sort of two questions. Table sugar is always going to be bad for your teeth. So if you're going to ingest something that's just sugar water, you would want to clean your teeth off right after that. There's variable sensitivity. Some people can eat more sweets than others and not get cavities, but you're pushing a habit there. The other thing you potentially run into if you're drinking pure sugar water is, are you going to run into rebound hypoglycemia? Some people are more sensitive to that than others. There are athletes like Kipchoge, the marathon champion from Kenya, and he drinks a bunch of iced tea and he puts a bunch of sugar into it. But, the guy's running world record 26 miles in 2 hours. So, and I know a lot of triathletes are having these sugar gels and everything. Ruth Heidrich, who's won a bunch of awards for triathlon, she said her favorite, pre-workout, pre-competition food was eating fruits. And she would just eat the night before. That would, stock up her glycogen, and she would go and compete after that. So those are different approaches to it. There's also one last thing is a couple points about athletic performance. You want to minimize fat in the blood. Fat sticks the red blood cells together, causing blood sludge, also rouleau formation, like a stack of coins in French. And when you stack your red blood cells together, you're going to decrease your oxygen delivery to the tissue. So you don't want to do that. On the other hand, things like beets, beet juice, for example, it has a lot of nitrates. So let's say you guzzle down 32 ounces of beet juice. Number one, you get hydration. Number two, you get the nitrates that are precursors to make nitric oxide. In the back of your tongue, you got the bacteria that convert the nitrates, NO3 to NO2, goes to your stomach, the gastric acid converts it from NO2 to nitric oxide. Then it goes into your blood, you get systemic vasodilation. So that will increase arterial blood flow. So that's why a lot of athletes, they've shown increased VO2 max after drinking beet juice. They've had increased performance on, stationary bicycle time trials. So those are also things you can do to improve athletic performance. As far as insulin, I'm not in the habit myself of prescribing insulin, so I don't know all the nuance and subtlety of insulin. But in general, if you can maintain your blood sugars on a lower dose of insulin, that would be preferable. Because the more insulin you take, then you start getting all these secondary issues of insulin. There's a lot of secondary issues with insulin. For example, the same enzyme that clears insulin out of the blood, insulin degrading enzyme, it's also the one that clears beta amyloid out of the blood. So when you have insulin resistance, you use up more of your insulin degrading enzyme, clearing out the insulin. There's less of it available to clear out the beta amyloid. It can only be manufactured in limited quantities. So what I'm saying here is that when you start getting up into higher amounts of daily insulin, you're, in a sense, wasting your insulin degrading enzyme such that it can't clear out the beta amyloid. Then beta amyloid starts going reverse back through the blood-brain barrier and increasing your risk of dementia. That's one of the mechanisms predisposing to Alzheimer's. So what I'm saying is there's good reasons to want to not have large amounts of insulin be needed every day.
Great. Next question. Does it seem that there are more brain issues in younger people since 2020, or is it the same as it was pre-pandemic?
Oh, yeah. I think young people are much worse off nowadays than they used to be. There was a book, I think the author's name was Jonathan Haidt, and it was called Anxiety Generation. And he emphasized the psychological effects of so much use of cell phones and social media. I've also seen children kind of become very distracted with their attention spans. For example, there was a disagreement between my wife on whether or not to buy my daughter a cell phone when she was really young. My daughter was the smartest of all the kids. She was always reading books and talking to me about the books. She was like in junior high at the time. And then my wife bought her cell phone. The kid just, they all become addicted to sending text messages to their friends, and their whole world becomes their little popularity sphere with their friends. So that kind of dumbs them down. The next thing is they typically will hold the cell phone up to their ear. The cell phones are low power microwave transmitters, and they have an electromotive force, EMF, which opens up the voltage gated calcium channels in the brain. Calcium is the aristocrat of all your electrolytes. It's sort of like sodium, potassium, magnesium. They're the minimum wage workers that get stuff done. But calcium, when it increases in the cell cytoplasm, which is what happens when you open up voltage gated calcium channels, when that calcium concentration goes up, it causes a cell to do whatever that cell does, which in a typical neuron, brain cell, is to release its neurotransmitter. So it causes overactivation of your brain cells. And that can make a person anxious. That can make a person worried. It can paradoxically also make a person depressed. So the incidence of psychiatric issues in teenagers has dramatically increased. So that's the electromotive physical reason. I think it's a bad idea to hold a cell phone to one's head. I think you should use the speakerphone whenever possible, and try not to even use cell phones that much. It kind of makes people stupid. The social media causes a lot of anxiety. That's now we're kind of getting into the psychology issues. But one of the things happening to young girls was they would go to Instagram and they would see all these girls on there that are pretty sophisticated with being able to, I don't know exactly how they do it. They edit their video to make themselves more beautiful. They look like perfect 10s. And then these little girls would see all these perfect 10 girls on Instagram and think, oh my God, I could never be that pretty. I'll never have a boyfriend. I'll never get a husband. I'll never have a child. And there was much more suicide. They would cut themselves and they would start dressing weird, that whole goth, pierce your eyebrow type of craziness. So what I'm saying is I think there's all those issues. And then there's an additional issue, what's messing up young people. First of all, there's plenty of toxins in the water and in the processed food. And the processed foods tend to be loaded with MSG, manufactured free glutamate and glutamate. And that's also a stimulant to the brain. And like caffeine too, these are causing increased glutamate release at the neurotransmitter sites. So basically, glutamate is about 90% of your brain neurotransmitters in your cerebral cortex, the part of your brain that does the thinking. And so you got about 5% is GABA. GABA is like the turning the light switch off, shuts things off. And then all the famous neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, they're only about in the ballpark of 1%. So what I'm saying is you're cranking up your glutamate. They're stressed out, they're sleep deprived, and they're drinking caffeine. And then they're also having all this glutamate overload from the processed food because it's put in the food to flavor it. It makes the food taste good. So they kind of have this glutamate rush, EMF bolus, and basically their brain cells are overstimulated, and that makes them anxious and it makes them kind of stupid and distracted.
All right. Very nice. Next question is,
Oh, actually, one last thing too, I wanted to add.
go ahead.
Another common problem with young people is that, and this is also middle-aged and older adults too, they have a lot of leaky gut. And we classically learn about leaky gut. Dr. McDougall was the first person to sort of popularize and teach everybody about leaky gut. I learned it from him. The mechanism of autoimmune disease, increased intestinal permeability is leaky gut. And then autoimmune mechanism is that you get larger chunks of protein, normally only a tripeptide, 3 amino acids at a time is the biggest piece of protein that should get across that gut barrier. But in the context of leaky gut, because of lack of dietary fiber, for example, or toxic chemicals in the food, you'll get bigger chunks of protein. Your immune system reacts to them. You get autoantibody cross-reactivity where it goes against your own body, causing autoimmune disease. Okay, so that's the autoimmune component of leaky gut. But there's a second component of leaky gut that's really good to know about. And that is simply increased permeability allows bacteria to get across that membrane. And it especially allows their endotoxins. Gram-negative bacteria make these endotoxins called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. And they also make, the gram-positive bacteria make LTA, lipoteichoic acid. These endotoxins get into the blood. So eating is called prandial. After eating is postprandial. So you get, and they're called endotoxins. So you get a postprandial endotoxemia. You basically have bacterial toxins floating around in your blood. And these are a major alarm bell for your immune system. Your immune system says, emergency, emergency. We got endotoxins all over the place. So your immune system starts responding to them. That makes your blood more prothrombotic. And in addition, your fiber normally feeds the good gut bacteria in your intestinal tract. They convert that into a short-chain fatty acid, butyrate, or also butyric acid. That goes to your epithelial cells of your gut, your enterocytes, they're called. Enteric tract is your gut. And they make tight junctions to solidify. So everything's tight. You can't get anything across it. Well, the relevance is that butyrate also dissolves into the blood. This, again, comes from your dietary fiber, and it goes up to your brain. And your endothelial cells in your brain also use it to make tight junctions. So you can't get anything across your blood-brain barrier. Okay, so what I'm saying is when one thing goes bad, several things go bad. When you've got leaky gut, you'll also have a shortage of butyrate for your blood-brain barrier. So you'll have increased permeability of your blood-brain barrier. And these endotoxins can get across your blood-brain barrier. And now the immune cells in your brain are called microglia. The microglia, they've got cell surface PRRs, pattern recognition receptors. And they sense, bacterial endotoxin getting into the brain, emergency. And they'll start to release toxic chemicals to, in a sense, sterilize the area around them, to kill the invading bacteria. They're afraid the brain has meningitis, okay? So they'll release these chemicals, and they irritate and destroy the adjacent neurons. They can cause a brain fog. So what I'm saying is the typical person, when they have a cognitive decline, dementia, and in a younger person, just a little bit of brain fog, quite often there's several simultaneous toxic things happening to the brain. And that's a good example of one. Leaky blood-brain barrier goes with leaky gut.
Terrific. All right. We only got, 6 hours more of questions. I'm kidding, but you're going into the detail quite a lot here. Next question is, Dr. Rogers, I know you've talked about this. Do you use shampoo, shower gel, deodorant? If not, how do you deal with it?
Well, I think the basic approach I have to dealing with the complexity of the modern world is to be a minimalist. I don't have much hair, obviously, so I don't use any shampoo at all. Okay. For my clothes, I don't use any laundry detergent. If you're a vegan and you don't cook with oil, you don't need a dishwasher. So you save on all those chemicals. Almost all these chemicals we encounter have lots and lots of estrogenic preservatives in them. Okay. Because the structure of an estrogen molecule with an aromatic ring in the corner and a hydroxyl group coming off it, that combination is called a phenol. It's very good for its antimicrobial purposes, and it's very shelf stable. So these are good chemicals for a company. It doesn't get ruined on the shelf. It works. It's cheap. Okay, so they're always going to be in personal care products. They're full of these estrogenic chemicals. Some shampoos will have 3 of them in there. So the way you avoid them, and they're in the detergents, they're in the softeners, and they're in the things that prevent wrinkles in your dryer. So I try to be as much of a minimalist as possible. You save money and you avoid problems. So that's my recommendation, is be as big a minimalist as you can.
All right, and I'll just pipe in here. I use this Kirk's Castile soap, sometimes no soap. This is just pure coconut oil, 100% coconut oil. I do use a shampoo, which is oatmeal. It's an oatmeal shampoo. These are things I got off of EWG, the environmental working group, where they go and rate the toxicity. I use this toothpaste called Hello, which is fluoride free. But again, I agree. I stopped using any laundry detergent, Peter. You inspired me after learning some of your habits. All right. So we've got the AHA states that 50% of cardiac fatalities occur within any prior clinical symptoms, without any prior clinical symptoms. I think this indicates standard cardiac metrics are inadequate. Dr. Nathan Byron says the first thing to investigate for cardiac health is vascular function of the entire body, which is best done by an EndoPAT test, described as the only FDA-cleared test for non-invasive assessment for endothelial dysfunction, clinically proven by leading cardiologists and so on. What do you think of the EndoPAT?
It kind of sounds to me like one other screening test. I think screening tests are largely a joke. If you've eaten the SAD diet, a Western diet, the Mediterranean diet, any of these diets, these high-fat diets, you've got atherosclerosis. You don't need a test to check it. You're not going to be able to see a vulnerable plaque. You know you have it. You don't cure a disease by taking a picture of it. You cure a disease by using a treatment that works. And the only thing proven to reverse coronary artery disease is a low-fat vegan diet with no oil, the Esselstyn diet. Okay, so just eat some version of the Esselstyn diet and forget about spending all your money on these tests. That's what I would recommend. It's the same low-fat vegan diet with no oil is also the one that minimizes your risk of cancer, minimizes your risk of obesity, minimizes your risk of diabetes, minimizes your risk of hypertension, minimizes your risk of leaky gut autoimmune disease, minimizes your risk of kidney failure, minimizes your risk of dementia. You kind of win all around because it's really the species-specific diet to optimize human health.
Okay, next one. I have autoimmune disease. Can I safely use flaxseed oil? If yes, how much per day? These should be some quick answers, Peter.
Yeah, quick. I don't know that word. I would avoid oils. Oils tend to be associated with increased risk of leaky gut. I know there are a lot of people recommending flax, but usually that's something in the context of flaxseed that's then ground up, and you take a small amount. I'm not familiar with the exact dose of it. I'm not that big a fan of flax because it's like 60% fat. I try to avoid fat as much as I can. But that's sort of the scoop on flax. I know it gets hyped a bit, and some people even say it decreases the risk of prostate cancer. I wouldn't be so sure. In my experience, usually when I've ended up looking closer at these recommended superfoods, almost always it ends up being industry-funded type of stuff. Flax is off the charts estrogenic. It's lignans rather than isoflavones like soy, but it's many, many thousands of times more estrogenic than other foods. And in general, things that are estrogenic increase the risk of autoimmune disease. For example, 80% of autoimmune diseases in women. And it's thought that estrogen has an effect on the immune system. The female immune system is different than the male immune system. It's sort of hyperreactive in general, but it also has like almost a schizophrenic component whereby it tolerates a pregnancy. And a pregnancy, that's a foreign body in your body.
So what do I wash my clothes with? Hot water is what I want. I see someone a comment here. Next question is, I'm on a low fat, low sodium, low protein, whole food, plant-based diet. I'm in great health. I'm bothered by nail toe fungus. How to deal with it without liver damaging medication?
Yeah, you want to avoid taking an oral antifungal, which might have a lot of side effects. It can be difficult to get fungus to completely go away. But, one of the things you want to do is optimize blood flow to your foot, which a low-fat, vegan, no oil, low-sodium diet does. There's other things you could do. You could talk to your podiatrist. Some of the things I've seen them do is have the person put their feet into a little tub of distilled water, then they can put it into salt water. I've also seen them recommend people rub Vaseline on their toes, which kind of smells. I would say talk to your podiatrist about that. But in the meantime, keep the healthy diet because that'll optimize the blood flow. If you want to go crazy, what you could do too is you could get rid of your shoes, get rid of your socks, buy an entirely new pair of shoes and socks, wash the floor in your house, in your bathroom, anywhere you might walk barefoot in your shower area, and sort of like stop exposing it to the, because it keeps getting re-exposed in your shoes and your socks unless you get new ones. So you could make that big step if you want to.
So next it says, this should be a quickie, soy nuts and seeds seem to be beneficial according to studies. Could Dr. Rogers possibly recommend them considering the advantages versus the disadvantages?
The old studies tend to be more reliable than the new studies. And there's lots of negative things shown about the old studies about soy. What these corporations do is they've got a profitable product. Soy is worth billions of dollars. So they had, they buy the journals, they buy the scientists, and they have them published. Let's say there's 10 studies showing soy is bad. Well, they'll hire a bunch of scientists and they'll produce 20 studies showing soy is good. And then they say the balance of the evidence, the majority of the papers suggest soy is good. Soy has been shown to damage the vaginal epithelium, fallopian tube epithelium, the uterine epithelium in women, which potentially will lower their fertility, in men to lower sperm counts, okay? Soy is subsidized. In general, you look at things that are subsidized, quite often they're things that lower fertility rates, okay? Aluminum is subsidized in your water, lowers fertility rates. F-, fluoride is subsidized in your water, lowers fertility rate. So I don't know if that's all a coincidence, but I can say that my recommendation is I avoid soy completely. Most of it in the USA is not organic. It's typically sprayed with glyphosate, which is a major toxin. It was initially patented like as an antibiotic. It's disruptive to your gut flora, increases your risk of leaky gut. It increases your risk of fatty liver, which is prediabetes or diabetes of the liver. It's an excitotoxin in the brain, activating the NMDA receptor, substituting for glycine. It also substitutes, it's thought, for glycine in proteins. Stephanie Seneff is sort of like the world scholar on that. She wrote an entire book on it, Toxic Legacy. But the bottom line is soy is also processed with hexane, which is a neurotoxin. It's very high in fat. I would recommend staying away from it. I think it's totally overrated. Like, why does a soy plant have thousands of times more estrogen than another plant? I think it's because some plants don't want to be eaten. It's, in a sense, a pesticide initially for the insects, but now it's, in a sense, a pesticide for us. So that's the scoop on soy. I think it should be avoided. As far as nuts are concerned, nuts are like 80 to 90% fat. Actually, I think on the Veg Source channel, Jeff Nelson, he did the best videos I've seen on the internet for nuts. All of a sudden, because it's in nuts and there's, billions of dollars behind promoting nuts as a food, the fat in nuts is magic. Okay. It's full of omega-6 fats, but all of a sudden it doesn't make you gain weight. It's cardioprotective. I don't believe any of that. Okay. 80 to 90% fat, all types of fat, as you saw in the Blankenhorn studies, the African green monkey studies, and other studies, Armstrong studies, they increase the risk of atherosclerosis and of becoming fat and of having diabetes. I don't see any reason to seek that out.
So can you talk about Graves' disease? Somebody is...
Graves' disease is a type of autoimmune thyroiditis where you've got autoantibodies. Autoantibody means auto means to attack oneself. So they attack the thyroid. Most thyroid disease is thought to be due to, an autoimmune mechanism, like Hashimoto's is a little bit more common. So I would avoid all the things that can cause leaky gut. I would also avoid all the halogens as best you can. Halogens is the vertical column in the periodic table of elements. Things like chlorine and fluoride, fluorine and bromide, and iodine. I would avoid all those things as best you could. I know you need iodine to make your thyroid hormone, but for example, what am I talking about? For example, I imaging guided surgeon is one of the things I do. I won't wear the blue gowns unless I have to, because the blue gowns are used for the operating room where you're going to have cautery. So they got flame retardant bromine in them. I won't use that. I won't use bromine to sterilize a pool for that same reason. You're kind of going to use chlorine, and you can't completely get around that, but you can remove the chlorine from your house with a carbon water filter. You can get a whole house carbon water filter. I think it's good in the kitchen to have a reverse osmosis filter. Those are other things you can do. You might go a little easy on the cruciferous vegetables. They're a little bit goitrogenic. You might want to, of course, avoid soy. Soy is also goitrogenic. So what I'm trying to say is avoid the things that block your thyroid function, avoid the things that cause autoimmune disease, and hopefully that'll bump up your thyroid function and protect you from ongoing autoantibody. And even if you're stuck having to take thyroid replacement, you might reduce the dose you need to take.
So next question, there are multiple forms of B12. Should we try to get the alternative forms? Talk about B12.
Well, I think the best version is methylcobalamin. That's the one I take. And I take it with the fewest ingredients. You don't want to take it like a lot of them, they put a sweetener in there like stevia. I wouldn't take it with stevia because I think that, that's been pretty strongly associated with infertility, for example, and who knows what else. I wouldn't take cyano because you know what cyano is, okay? Cyano is, the last part of that word is "ide," okay? You know what that is, okay? I don't want that because I'll tell you what they tell you. They tell you, well, so what if you're eating that? It's such a low amount, it doesn't matter. Well, I wonder if some of that maybe accumulates in your body. I would never take that. And again, the one I use is methylcobalamin with the fewest number of ingredients. I've heard some other good things about hydroxycobalamin, but I don't have experience with that. And then you want to confirm it's working. Check your blood levels and make sure your blood levels are reasonable, you know.
Next question. My latest vitamin D came to 10 ng/dl. What should I do? Also, is there a link between vitamin D and low mood? Many people feel low mood in the winter. Does it have anything to do with serum vitamin D level?
Well, if you start talking about mood, you can get into seasonal affective disorder, lack of exposure to sunlight with the shorter days. Dr. McDougall had some good lectures about vitamin D, and his recommendation was unless you were an institutionalized patient who couldn't go outside, you should get your vitamin D from the sunshine instead of from taking pills. I think that the danger of low vitamin D has been greatly exaggerated as a way to sell it. You know, it's a super popular supplement. So I would say if at all possible, try to get it outside from the sunshine. And if you feel you have to take it in the short term, fine. But as soon as it gets warm outside, go back outside and get sunshine, because sunshine does a lot of other good things for you. You know, in addition to having your vitamin D come up and activating it properly, it releases nitric oxide precursors from your subcutaneous tissues that vasodilate you. According to Stephanie Seneff and her research, it increases the sulfation of your glycocalyx to improve the zeta potential of that. And I've heard other good things about sunshine too. You know, I've heard things even that if you eat greens, the chlorophyll, you know, gets activated in a sense while it's flowing through your blood by the red light that gets through your skin. And that facilitates the reduction of coenzyme Q into the active form, you know, from ubiquinone to ubiquinol, such that it sort of energizes your mitochondria, so to speak. I mean, we're made to be out in the sun. Usually, when, you know, the way you get optimized health is by doing what Mother Nature wants you to do, not by trying to trick Mother Nature.
Next question. It's I'm a health coach and I work with several older clients in their late 70s. Are there any specific requirements regarding protein, salt, or fat that are important to this population? I truly appreciate it, and so on.
Yeah, the whole protein thing is a big, highly debated topic, okay? And I think the way to go is you want to minimize your protein as low as possible. And I say that because there's other people out there who say, oh, you want to increase protein in the elderly. They need more protein, otherwise they become weak. I don't believe that. And I'll tell you why. These populations are like Papua New Guinea. They don't take protein supplements. They were eating 93% of their calories from sweet potatoes, which only have 4.5% of their calories from protein. And they were very strong, physically fit, and did a lot of manual labor. And they were energetic and strong, even despite the fact they smoked a lot, okay? So what I'm saying is they didn't need protein supplements. We really need much less protein than is widely thought. Human breast milk has only about 6% of calories from protein. Some people say 5. Some papers say as much as almost, you know, almost getting up to 7. But I would say it's probably in the ballpark of 6 if we're looking at most of these papers. And that's your most rapid phase of growth in life. So you really would be expected to need much less than that the rest of your life. There were also some papers about trying to refeed people with so-called kwashiorkor, which at first I thought was a protein deficiency, but it's really like starvation. And there was a big paper by the name of Golden. It came out in 1982, and the point was they fed people just 2.5% of calories from protein. 2.5% of calories from protein. It's a real minimal amount. It's not even like 20 grams a day per kilogram. Well, anyways, 20 grams per day. And the patients did really well. They did fantastic, as well as all the other patients. So I think you really get by on much less protein. Also, Walter Kempner was feeding people rice. And if they needed extra calories, he would just give them white sugar, table sugar, because he wanted to minimize their dietary nitrogen, because a lot of them were kidney failure patients, and he wanted to minimize their fat because also they were obese, some of them, and they were hypertensive patients. Well, the point is Kempner's diet was only about 4.5% of calories from protein or less than that, and the patients did very well on that. In the opinion of Nathan Pritikin, Dr. McDougall, it's impossible to be too low in protein if you're eating any type of, you know, plant-based diet, starch-based diet. So I think it's real exaggerated. Okay, now what are the potential problems of eating too much protein? First of all, if you want to make an animal live longer, what's the best proven thing? Calorie restriction, right? But nobody wants calorie restriction. That's like a euphemism for starving. Okay, so the next thing you can do is, well, you can reduce protein and get essentially about the same result in animal-mammal studies, all right? But that's still a little bit tough to restrict protein. But guess what they found you could do? You could just restrict methionine. Methionine is an essential amino acid that's especially high in meat compared to in plants. It's lower. So just by becoming a vegan, you eat, because you don't eat meat, you'll eat much less methionine. And if you specifically even try to lower it more, like let's say perhaps avoiding your beans, for example, even though some beans don't have that much methionine, they just have tons of protein. Beans tend to have about 30% of calories from protein. Sweet potatoes only 4.5%. So beans are almost 10 times more protein than a sweet potato. And almost all of these foods, they'll have all the amino acids, just some and more or less. What I'm saying is protein restriction is probably what's going to increase your longevity, not adding more protein. In addition, the higher the amount of dietary protein you eat, the bigger the workload you put on your kidneys. That's about 75% of what your kidneys do is excrete the nitrogen. There's only nitrogen in protein. There's no nitrogen in carbohydrates or fat. So what I'm saying is you're dumping a big workload on your kidneys, increasing their propensity to fail, to develop proteinuria, albuminuria, protein leaking into the urine. So that's not good. You're going in the opposite direction of the methionine, calorie, protein restriction, things that are shown to increase longevity, proven to increase longevity. You're also putting a big burden. It's especially the methionine and cysteine. They're the sulfur-containing amino acids that are most acidic. All amino acids are acidic, amino acid. But still, in general, they're acidic. I mean, there's a little more to it than that because they do have a base on them with the amino. What I'm saying is you're just creating all this workload. When your kidneys excrete acid, they simultaneously excrete calcium. It's like a combined excretion. So you're going to get calcium in your urine. All right. When you get calcium in your urine, you now have calciuria. That can precipitate in the kidney tubules and predispose to kidney failure. If bigger amounts precipitate, that causes kidney stones, which are very painful. So what I'm saying is the more methionine and animal protein you're eating, especially, the more you predispose yourself to kidney failure. And you pull that calcium that's going to be used to buffer the excretion of the hydrogen protons. You pull that from your bones, causing osteoporosis. You pull that from your muscles, causing muscle wasting. So that's not going to make your muscles stronger. I think the main thing people need to do is exercise. And these, blue zone people and these rural populations, they don't take protein supplements. They just keep busy and active. So I'd say exercise, get your sleep, manage your stress. All that's going to help you maintain your physical fitness and strength.
All right. Next question is the rice and arsenic. How would you respond to someone who says that almost all rice is too high in arsenic, even if it's not grown in southeastern U.S., and even if it's Lundberg rice or rice from Asia? I heard from someone else that only Lotus Foods rice is safe when it comes to arsenic. So there's arsenic in some rices and some types of rices, just like there's arsenic in chicken. What say you?
Yeah, the arsenic is relatively low in Lotus rice. They grow it in places where they don't have. You can go to their website, lotusfoods.com. You can go to the website for Lundberg Farms. It's something like info.lundberg.com, and they'll show you the rice numbers, okay? The reason why California and non-southeastern states were thought beneficial is they used to grow cotton there. When you grow cotton, they had a boll weevil insect infestation, and they would spray arsenic pesticides on there. Then it would get into the soil. It's a textile crop, so you can spray more arsenic on it than you would on a food crop. And it just takes many decades to come out of the soil. So then they started growing rice in these fields, so that rice has more arsenic in it. But even the other rice had problems because the chicken farmers had a problem with chickens having intestinal parasites that responded well to antibiotics, arsenic-based antibiotics. Then it got into the chicken feces, but they sold the chicken feces to the rice farmers who use it then as a fertilizer. So that's a big way that arsenic got into the fertilization for rice. But the other thing too is rice is such a popular food and such a big health food that it got stigmatized. What I mean by that is there's lots of other foods that have way more arsenic than rice, but rice it's got all the bad press because it's like, oh my God, even rice is messed up with arsenic. But the amounts are pretty small. White rice has less arsenic than brown rice because the outer bran, when that's removed, some fat goes with it, and arsenic, a lot of arsenic goes with it. You can just, get your rice, rinse it once or twice, and you can eat it. I've never seen an arsenic toxicity case. Dr. McDougall said he's never seen it. Don't get me wrong, arsenic is a real toxin, and I would avoid it as best one could. But I think and I do know a bunch of people that eat rice, I think the stigmatization of arsenic in rice is overrated. I would still try to minimize it, but I just don't think it's as bad as a lot of these other problems.
Next question is, I would like to know, does vinegar as a salad dressing cause osteoporosis?
I don't know the answer to that. I personally don't use any vinegar. I avoid it. I know it's got some positive press to have an anti-glycemic effect, which isn't that important to me. Your blood glucose will spike less when you eat a carbohydrate meal if you put vinegar on it first. You know, and it can taste good. I'm pretty simple. You know, I just eat the salad. I don't put anything on it. So I don't know if that vinegar has an effect on osteoporosis.
Great. Now I'm going to change. I've got, I'm going to go back and forth. I got about 30 questions emailed to me in addition to what's on the board. I want to give everybody a little chance here. Here's somebody. My 55-year-old husband has permanent AFib for 6 years now. He's 50 pounds overweight, takes blood thinners, sleep apnea. He's 2 cardio versions with no success. Will diet alone solve his AFib?
Well, there's a saying about AFib that AFib begets AFib, meaning that the longer you've had AFib, the more likely you are to have it the rest of your life. Okay, and there's different mechanisms of AFib. You know, basically it's a disruption of the conduction pathways from the sinoatrial node down to the ventricle. And the more of that atrial muscle tissue you lose, the less ability you have to coordinate the atrial contraction with the ventricular filling and ventricular contraction. So you lose some of your left ventricular filling, meaning you can lose some of your cardiac output. Okay, so what I would do if I had AFib, well, first of all, I would try to optimize all of my atherosclerosis risk factors as best I could to optimize perfusion of the heart. Also, by minimizing your dietary fat, you lower your blood viscosity. Your blood becomes thinner, more like water instead of like a milkshake. So when you decrease your blood pressure, you decrease the workload on the heart. And you might be able to, in that way, compensate for your damaged cardiac muscle. Because the worse it gets, the more likely you're going to end up needing more drugs, potentially a pacemaker, and having all these problems. Also, it's good not to be fat. The lower the percentage of calories you eat from fat in your diet, the skinnier you will get. Okay, Dr. McDougall would talk about, you know, he says the first thing a patient should do is eat 90% starch, 90% of calories from starch, 5% from fruits, 5% from vegetables. If they're trying to lose weight, you should increase the percentage of calories that comes from vegetables. And even, you know, it's been said to eat your vegetables first, because if you eat your vegetables first, you stretch your stomach, you get early satiety. Okay, Chef AJ is big on promoting that idea, and I think it's a good idea. Okay, so you want to minimize your weight. And if you look at these starch-eating populations, they're skinny. Look at the Chinese before 1975 when they ate white rice up to 90% of the calories. 1 billion out of 1 billion is skinny. The only big guy I ever saw in China before that was Bolo, who fight with Bruce Lee, and he was taking steroids, I think. Okay, so what I'm saying is that makes you skinny. There's only 1% of calories from fat in rice. Look at Papua New Guinea. All the pictures I ever saw of them, they were all skinny and fit and muscular guys. There's only 1% of calories from fat in sweet potatoes. Look at regular potatoes, 1% of calories from fat. So what I'm saying is, eating these diets will shrink the body size. If you shrink your body size to optimal weight, like this guy is 55 pounds overweight, that makes life easier for your heart to have 55 extra pounds that are gone. You don't have to pump weight to. So anyways, you can do all these things and try to turn your AFib around, but it might be too late. You know, the longer you've had AFib, the less likely you're ever going to reverse it. But you'll have a good chance to reverse your sleep apnea. Sleep apnea increases your risk of becoming demented. And you want to get everything else as optimized as you can, because you've now got 2 risk factors for dementia, AFib and sleep apnea, and obesity, which probably means hypertension.
The topic of dental health as an older person, early 60s, with old fillings now failing. I'm doing my best to mitigate the damage. Fluoride is one topic. Read it's harmful in water, but useful when applied topically, e.g. toothpaste, then spit it out. Another question is mercury fillings, whether to leave them alone or remove, and going forward, besides benefit of a plant-based diet helping us achieve better blood circulation, which should help keep our gums and teeth healthier, what else might one do?
Well, there's a couple issues here. First of all, if you hold your cell phone to your mouth, that's thought to cause the release of more mercury. So I wouldn't do that. When you brush your teeth, if you got those fillings, I wouldn't brush directly over the amalgams, because that can also release more mercury into your mouth. I do have some myself, okay? And I made the decision to just keep them. My father had some and he just kept them, and I don't think it had any negative effect on him that we could tell. I know I've heard that a small amount of mercury leaks from them, and hopefully you can swallow it, excrete it, or it's not having that toxic of effect on you. I know that they're starting to have some biological dentists that can remove it, but you have to be worried that you're not exposed to a massive amount during the removal. So that's why I didn't go down that path, because I was afraid of that. I'm not sure how reliably you could find a dentist that knows how to remove them. The next thing is fluoride. The so-called beneficial effect of fluoride, it's pretty minimal. So I personally just avoid it completely, because it's a neurotoxin. And it also increases the rate of aluminum being absorbed into your body, and that's also neurotoxic. They form complexes together. Fluoride, they put it in tons of psychiatric medications because it increases traversal of the blood-brain barrier. It binds very tightly to things, making them less polar. Look at Prozac, a real popular antidepressant, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. What's its real name? Fluoxetine. The flu is for fluoride, okay? So I would avoid fluoride. I would never use it.
Very good. I'm 84. I have a heart murmur since birth, intermittent fasting with a 27-hour window. I heard intermittent fasting was hard on the heart and wonder about the truth of this statement.
Well, I can tell you, I do a form of intermittent fasting. I do the OMAD diet, 1 meal a day diet with, about a 24-hour window, but it's not really 24-hour because let's say I start eating at 7, it might take me a couple hours to eat them in the process of doing other things. One OMAD diet means 1 meal a day diet. The reason I do it is because it's convenient. It's kind of like the Roman soldier diet. They worked all day, and then at night when it was dark, they had the campfire, they made food, they ate and went to sleep. And that's convenient. Also, you're smartest in the morning because your brain cleans itself overnight with a lymphatic system. So I like to do my challenging academic work in the morning. I don't like to eat breakfast because by not eating breakfast, I can sleep in a little later. So then I got more energy because I'm well slept for work, and I do a lot of work in the daytime. I don't even eat lunch just because it's kind of inconvenient, and I'm really busy in the daytime. But it's okay to eat twice a day. It's okay to do intermittent fasting. Your liver is able to maintain blood glucose levels typically for about 48 hours before you go into ketosis. The real question is, are you not going to be hungry? If you're eating a starch-based diet, and sometimes beans have a good satisfaction and hunger prolonged effect. So you don't have to do the OMAD diet. I just do it because it's convenient. I mean, in a perfect world, if I didn't have to work, I'd probably get back in the habit of eating a little bit of a late lunch and then eating dinner again later.
What is the best substitute instead of table salt? Seems like salt is the most difficult thing for me to omit.
Oh, yeah. What I meant for that last patient, to protect your heart, the best thing is just eat the heart-healthy diet. Eat the heart-healthy diet. That's the thing that protects your heart. Carl Esselstyn said every single patient who truly followed his diet, they never had a recurrent cardiovascular event. 0. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And it's sort of like, what more could you want? I can tell you all the patients are almost all the same. They're almost all fat, sick, and stupid by the time they're 60. Okay. And it's all for the same reason. Most of them are overweight. They've got hypertension. They've got prediabetes or diabetes and coronary artery disease, cerebral vascular disease. It's all the same stuff. And the treatment's the same. Either you do it or you don't. So anyways.
So this is on a salt substitute. I actually use a thing called Benson's Tasty Table, I think it's called. I got that from Chef AJ years ago, and I love it. You get used to it, but it's a powder kind of thing. I don't know if it's got some herbs in it or something. What do you do for a salt substitute, Peter?
Yeah, I don't use any salt substitutes, but the big thing that comes to mind was Finland. Finland had terrible high rates of coronary artery disease. And around 1970, they decided to do something about it. They hired this physician epidemiologist named Pekka Puska, and he sort of taught the families how to cook lower fat, to eat more plant foods, to eat more blueberries instead of all the meat, dairy, milk, and whatnot they're eating. And one of the things he did is he substituted KCl, potassium chloride, for regular salt, sodium chloride. And they had a dramatic, like 87% reduction in cardiovascular events. So that's pretty incredible. The highest you can go is 100%. So anyways, I've heard, though, that KCl doesn't taste so great. I've never tasted it myself. I just don't add salt to my food. And also if you do something a little bit, it's harder to quit. Like, let's say you're an alcoholic. If you're still having a couple beers on Saturday, it's harder to lose your cravings than if you never have any beer. So I just never add salt to my food, and I don't have any cravings for it. The other thing, though, that's talked about, there's a guy by the name of Richard Moore. He wrote a great book called The High Blood Pressure Solution. And he pioneered a term called the K factor. And so K factor is ratio of potassium to sodium. And he recommended as long as you're 5 times higher in your potassium than your sodium, your blood pressure is probably going to be okay. I think if you look at a 100% vegan diet, plant-based diet, you're going to see numbers like 20 times more potassium than sodium. So that will also help you to prevent high blood pressure. Like, I looked at my diet, it's over 20 times more potassium than sodium. If you got good kidney function, if you're in kidney failure, you don't want to do that. So what am I basically saying here is, if you're eating more potassium, that's one way to counter the effect of the sodium.
My question is,
one last thing on the sodium.
Yep.
If you just sprinkle a little salt on your food after you cook the food and then you eat it, that will be right next to your taste buds. You'll taste that on your tongue right away. So that's much better to do. You certainly don't want to put the salt into the cooking container, the pot, whatever, before you're just about to taste it, because then you'll end up using a lot more sodium. And also avoid all processed food. There's tons of sodium in processed food. So that's it.
So this question is, what can make my energy more equal throughout the day? I don't get hungry, but I feel my energy drop. It's like there's not enough time to keep eating through the day. I wonder if I could be limited fruit. I have oatmeal with berries in the morning, but little fruit during the day. I have green salads, avocado toast, or baked potatoes. What food source can make my energy level improve evenly throughout the day? Lost 30 pounds over the last 2 years eating plant-based whole foods.
Okay, there's a couple of reasons why you can get that energy drop in the afternoon. Number one, make sure you're sleeping well enough. You'll have a lot more energy if you sleep better. So the big thing about sleeping better is try to go to bed early, okay? And then there's a whole bunch of things on sleep hygiene. Make your room dark, get all the distractions out of your room, etc. So do whatever you can to sleep better. Exercise in the day, have some sunshine in the daytime. Okay, that's number one. Number two, avoid things that cause rebound hypoglycemia. Like you're eating oatmeal, I would try to eat like a thicker type of oatmeal, less processed. You don't want to eat, if you eat instant oatmeal, you're more predisposed to get a little bit of rebound hypoglycemia than if you're eating, steel cut oats and the less processed forms of oatmeal. The other thing is people often have caffeine in the morning. They'll have coffee or other forms of caffeine in the morning, and that will spike your blood glucose in the morning, can also cause rebound hypoglycemia in the afternoon. So I recommend get rid of all caffeine, gradually taper it off and quit all caffeine. I found something that I call a caffeine substitute, and it's drinking beet juice. You can guzzle down some beet juice and it gives you an energy boost. Just being hydrated gives you an energy boost. So just drinking some water to hydrate yourself gives you a bit of an energy boost. You better perfuse your bodily tissues when you're hydrated. But guzzling down beet juice, the advantage of that is number one, besides hydration, you also get increased nitrates, nitric oxide precursors to vasodilate your blood vessels. Number three, it increases your blood glucose level, your sugar level in your blood. That gives you some more energy. And the nice thing I like about drinking beet juice is that you don't get the insomnia effect that you get from caffeine. I sleep real deep. I sleep like a rock. So anyways, beet juice, chase it down with a little bit of water. That's also great for increasing exercise performance. I'm not a fan of avocados. Avocados, they have a tendency to spray more and more on them this fungal inhibitor. It starts with the letter A and then P, and then the next two letters are E and then L. And that fungal inhibitor, there's potential for some pretty significant contaminants in it. If you read the chem data sheets, I went through them. I would never take it. Trust me, if you read them, you'll never want to take it.
All right. And we can't say that word, I guess. And the next one here is how to check blood pressure to get accurate readings at home. Do you recommend a specific cup?
I don't know a specific cuff brand, but you want to make sure the cuff fits. If it's too tight, you'll get elevated pressures. Other things, it's good to be seated for like 5 minutes before you take the pressure, and you want to stop talking. So what happens is when, let's say somebody's taking your blood pressure for you, there's a tendency, the person's right in front of you to just talk to them. But the more you talk, the higher your pressure is going to go. You want both your feet on the floor. You want to just relax. Don't have too tight a shirt on. And don't talk. And then always check your blood pressure at least twice, because the second pressure is very often significantly lower than the first one. And if you want, check it again after that, but at least the second time, and you'll get a more accurate blood pressure reading in that sense.
Great. Okay, been vegetarian since 15, not a health conscious one. Then I had an almost fatal heart attack at 51, had one stent, immediately switched to strict Esselstyn-McDougall protocol for those remaining 12 years. I'm 63, and against doctor recommendations, have not taken any medication to this day. I feel strong, healthy, sporty, active kind of person. My cholesterol is in the higher side, total 170, LDL 120. And it's not genetics. If it were, the levels would be much higher. I've heard this kind of question regularly being put. Almost all the veg doctors I know of, they always brush it off and say, change your diet and the cholesterol levels will drop. What say you?
Well, I would say take a close look at what you're eating. Again, I would try to minimize all dietary fat. White rice, 1% of calories from fat. White potatoes, 1% of calories from fat. Sweet potatoes, 1% of calories from fat. All of those things will dramatically drop your percent of fat intake. For example, look at your beans. If you're eating beans, lentils are 3% of calories from fat. But if you're eating garbanzos, those are 13% of calories from fat. So you want to minimize those. Okay. I forget the exact number for oatmeal. I think it's in the ballpark of around 15% of fat. So you might want to, try minimizing all your dietary fat. You'd be amazed how much you can get it down, and see if that helps you out, if that's making a significant difference. That's what I would do, because I'd like to keep your total cholesterol below 150. Some people can say try to keep it 140 or lower. I'll bet you can lower it more than that. I would first of all try all that stuff, because I would always want to try to fix the problem with diet and lifestyle first. And if that doesn't work, then you could consider medications. But I would try to fix it first with diet and lifestyle. Also when you're hydrated, if you're hydrated when you check your blood lab, your numbers will improve because you dilute things a little bit. So that's another thing you can do. Manage your stress, get your sleep, because otherwise your cortisol comes up, and your cortisol will tend to drive up blood pressure, and it'll also pull more lipids into your blood. So getting adequate sleep lowers your blood lipids. Avoiding all animal protein, that lowers your total cholesterol. Avoiding caffeine, because that does the same things as being stressed out and sleep deprived. All of those things should also help improve your blood lipids.
Says, well, as there are many of us who can't change our diet for the better anymore, since we are already on an ideal diet, Esselstyn McDougall protocol, very low salt, no sugar, fat, oil, nuts or seeds, no cheat days. What are we to do? Should we be worried or consider taking statins? Okay, you know what? I think this was just an extension of the last one that went on to a second.
Yeah, I get it, but it is a relevant question that comes up. Some people say no matter what they do, they have some trouble optimizing their blood lipids. Okay. Now, if it's just a small amount, like you're hovering around 160, 170, on your total cholesterol, it might be just hard for you. You can try all the things I just said, but if it still doesn't work, you're probably going to be okay. I've heard Dr. Ornish say this, and I've heard Dr. Esselstyn say this, that in their experience, if the patients really follow the diets, they tend to do very well. Okay?
I see somebody in the comments mentioning niacin.
You could consider that. Me personally, I would try. See, people think it's the easy thing to do to take the drug. I think I don't want to take any drugs. All drugs have side effects. So I always push really hard to try to fix the problem with diet and lifestyle if I can. And I think that's a better long-term move. So.
And now
anyway.
Here's the next one. What do you think caused Dr.
That's
McDougall?
A giant question. Okay, but I'll just tell you one thing. He was mentally with it the week of his death. Okay, he made educational videos, so it wasn't some slow chronic decline. Whatever it was kind of a sudden exit.
Yeah, I actually let me show something here. I want to show something if I can find it. Here it is. This. Dr. McDougall had two really severe falls in his life, two very significant ones. I think the first one was in 2015, and he broke some bones. He fell, and he had a hard time coming back. And of course, he had lifelong damage from the stroke that he had when he was 19, and couldn't really exercise like everyone else. He always walked with a limp. He loved to windsurf, and he went hiking with his kids, but I don't think he ever did running. I don't think he was into weightlifting and so on. So I think that recovering from that 2015 fall was a big deal for him. This picture that I'm showing you is not Dr. McDougall's house, but it's representative of after the Tubbs fire in 2017. He and Mary rented a house in Healdsburg, which is half an hour north of Santa Rosa, because her own house had burnt down. And the house had a front door that was on the second floor. So you had to walk up a set of stairs like this in order to get to your front door and get in. And one night, I guess, John was tired. Maybe his limp gets more pronounced, but he fell down an entire flight of stairs like this from the top to the bottom. And he went into kidney failure. He sustained extremely serious injuries. He had internal bleeding going on. I would have to ask his assistant, Tiffany, to remember what all the details were. But it took a very long time. I think that, contributed to his demise and to his, fragility. And it was a very hard time coming back. In terms of, what the cause was, my understanding is that John said he did not want to have a autopsy, he said that long ago, whenever he died, whether it was at 78 or 108. And, so beyond that, without an autopsy, you're just really on speculation. My speculation would be that his heart stopped, that, you're fine, you're well, you're great. The next morning you're dead, your heart stopped. And frequently, pathologist friend of mine said, probably something like a idiopathic ventricular fibrillation, which is a severe cardiac arrhythmia that affects the heart's ventricles. It causes kind of a chaotic electrical activity in the heart, making it so the ventricles quiver rather than contracting normally. Idiopathic just means, we don't know what it's from. It's unknown. And especially it can happen with someone with no known heart disease, no symptoms. And it's fatal within minutes because, the sudden loss of blood. If your heart doesn't get blood and you're asleep and, you don't have any way to restart it, that's what can happen. As to what could cause that, that's, in a healthy, otherwise very healthy person, again, that's where, is there something causing inflammation? Is there something that would require staining of, tissues and looking at proteins and, different things like that to go much deeper. So I don't think we're ever going to know. I do think that he was a little bit behind the 8 ball with those late injuries that may have contributed. And let's go on to the next.
I would like to add just a little bit about McDougall. Is that for McDougall, his lifespan and his health span were the same thing. What I mean by that is most people, here's what they do. They kind of progressively crash and burn. Like I said, a typical patient's fat, sick, and stupid by 60 years of age. McDougall was sharp as a tack even the week of his death. So his brain was intact up until the end. So he got, 78 years of good brain function versus most people, they're only getting about 55 years of good brain function, if that much. Okay. Also, his stroke was relatively unique. I'm going to bet you it was an arterial dissection because that's the most common reason for a stroke in a young person. He was only, around 20 years of age or so, such that it's not like the result or the sequela of, adult chronic diabetes and hypertension in that context. But still, the fall sounds like a pretty big event. And also, it's psychologically traumatic. His house burns down, then he falls, and that's a terrible fall if he's going into rhabdomyolysis and kidney failure. So that way, because he looked quite physically weakened, in his last years compared to how robust he was, at around 60 when he was giving a lot of his medical lectures, for example.
Yeah, I think it took a big, all right, enough of this. Mr. Rogers, I'm 60 years old. We have a lifetime of issues with constipation since a child. I'm not overweight, do not have other health issues, eaten whole food, plant-based for about 10 years, but has not fixed my problem. Is magnesium oxide a safe product to take to help with this issue? I've tried many things over the years, met with nutritionists, taking a variety of supplements, eating lots of prunes. None works for me. Started taking magnesium oxide and it works, but is it safe for the rest of my life? Do you have any suggestions? Currently on 724 milligrams daily.
Well, again, I would try to fix the problem with diet and lifestyle first if I could. And then if you still can't fix it, then go to plant. So what could you do? Just being hydrated tends to help treat constipation. Dairy, for example, is a strong cause of constipation. So I'd make sure there's absolutely nothing dairy in your diet. Then take a look at what starch you're eating. If you're eating white rice, that's relatively low in fiber. Look through all the fiber content and all the different starches. Eat one with a higher amount of fiber. See if that helps. Eat more vegetables that have more fiber or whatever it is. But I would try to find out if upping your fiber intake from whole plant foods can resolve the problem and staying hydrated. See if you can get it to work with that. If you can't, then you can consider taking it. I don't have much experience prescribing laxatives, so you might want to look into somebody who does. That William Bolshevitz guy, he wrote the book Fiber Fueled. He seems like a pretty knowledgeable guy. You can see what he has to say on the matter. But that's about what I can tell you.
Yeah, sounds good. Can you do an investigative full episode on Apeel? Well, you just spoke about that. Would you consider spending some of your efforts and energy trying to improve McDougall's Wikipedia page? Good luck with that. I actually tried to correct some errors on Dr. Esselstyn's page at one point early on. He actually asked me, the city he lived in, they had a lot of just provably factually wrong stuff. And I contacted him, I thought in a nice way. And I was told, this is not Dr. Esselstyn's page. he does not control what's on his page. So I wouldn't waste any time trying to improve somebody's Wikipedia page myself.
Yeah, I call it slanderpedia. They always try to, anybody who does something good gets slandered. So take a look at that. Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. McDougall, they should both be, major chapters in the medical textbooks. Neither one of them is in the medical textbooks at all. Neither one of them will ever be given a Nobel Prize or any type of award. They don't want the public to know about these people, because if you learn how to cure your disease, then you don't need to take pills. If you cure a patient, you lose a customer. So none of these guys are in the textbooks. And actually, I joke, if you want to understand what causes disease and how to cure disease, your first step should be to not read the medical textbook, because there's no cures in there. It's not allowed to explain what causes disease or how to cure disease in a medical textbook. They always say the same thing. It's associated with aging, seems to be partly genetic. It might in some cases be due to an infection like a virus. And it also seems associated in some instances with socioeconomic disparity. Well, doesn't that sound nice? It's a bunch of BS. The incidence of hypertension in these plant-based communities that don't add salt to the food is 0. Okay.
Exactly. All right, here's another one. Good day, Dr. Rogers. Must be from down under. If I fasted for 24 hours, ate 500 milligram jar of honey, what would be elevated in my blood serum? Okay. If I fasted 24 hours, ate 500 grams of butter, what would be elevated in my blood serum? I'm trying to understand how excess sugars make you fat and what are triglycerides and how they are different from blood lipids. Any comment?
Well, I can tell you what butter is going to do. Butter is full of saturated fat, and saturated fat is a really bad fat. It makes everything worse. It's going to elevate your cholesterol. It's going to give you blood sludge. It's going to predispose you to atherosclerosis. It's going to predispose you to diabetes. It's going to cause insulin resistance. Sat fat has the strongest effect to cause insulin resistance, which means to cause diabetes out of all the fats. All the fats increase your risk of diabetes, but sat fat's the worst. It also is the strongest associated with leaky gut. It's associated with leaky kidney, blood barrier, and increased protein in the urine, albuminuria. It's associated with leaky blood-brain barrier, decreased cognitive function. Sat fat is not good. It's just stupid. I recommend minimizing your intake of sat fat. Honey, I'm a little bit less familiar with. Like what exact percent of honey is glucose and what percent of it is fructose. I personally don't eat it. But that's kind of like the key question, because fructose will predispose you more to fatty liver, for example, increased serum uric acid. Those are things you don't want. Glucose is not that big of a deal. Glucose is used by the entire body and it goes throughout the body, whereas fructose primarily goes to the liver and it's metabolized different than glucose. It predisposes to fatty liver. So I don't like it. And
should a woman eat more fats like flax seeds when trying to conceive when pregnant, or could she just keep eating the Spartan vegan Dr. Rogers diet, making sure she's not getting enough calories, not OMAD, eating more often? I'm already really slim and have no weight to lose. Dr. McDougall said there's no need for more fats, but I want to know what Dr. Rogers thinks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't like the idea of eating flax, because even though the flax estrogens are different than the soy estrogens, the flax estrogens are more lignin, so to speak, whereas they're more isoflavone type estrogens in the soy. You don't want to be messing around with anything estrogenic when you're pregnant. I would worry about that potentially having an effect on the pregnancy. So I would avoid the flax. There's nothing magic about flax. When they studied all these long-lived populations, they weren't eating flax. I don't think you need to seek it out in any way. It's just that there's a lot of hype and popularization through corporate advertising for things like flax and soy and omega-3 supplements. So people think, oh, I need that. But it's sort of like you're like a bug running to the zapper. Stay away from the zapper. You know that people are healthy just eating plant-based diets, starch-based diets. Why go looking for problems?
So here's somebody asking you, what is your total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglycerides, and cholesterol ratio, considering you're hardcore vegan, not eating oil, nuts, avocado, etc.? What do you recommend these cholesterol levels to be if eating whole food, plant-based with no oil, nuts, avocado lifestyle?
I can tell you, I only go by my total cholesterol, and it bounces between 90 to 140. It's always in that range, 90 to 140. My triglycerides are good too. I know they're less than 100. I haven't checked it in a while, but they've always been great. I know they're less than 100. What do I judge myself by? I judge myself by my energy level. For example, I have to go up 10 flights of stairs to get to my office when I'm at work. And so I have to carry my heavy backpack and stuff. And I got, and I go up the stairs real fast. And if my energy level's good, I feel pretty good about that. Like I said, my total cholesterol's always been good, 90 to 140. So since I've been 100% vegan, so I don't bother checking it,
Sounds reasonable.
My thyroid functions were all good. My liver functions, everything is good. So I don't check it that much. And,
Right.
My background medically, just, I was an imaging guided surgeon with the emphasis on vascular disease. And then I also was a neuroradiologist. And a lot of how I got started in this reading was both because I went through an obese phase. I was a star McDougall to lose my weight. I went from 220 down to 154. And then my mother had cancer. My father had coronary artery disease. And I kind of couldn't find the answers in the medical textbook. So I started to read extensively on nutrition and health. And then what happened too is I seen more and more demented patients. I'm like, why are all these people so demented and stupid? And I tried to figure out that question, which led me to deep study of what causes atherosclerosis, what causes hypertension, what causes diabetes, what causes obesity, what causes cognitive decline, what causes excitotoxicity, etc. And I just found that, oh my gosh, all the textbooks are completely wrong. Medical textbooks are a joke. They really are. They avoid all the main issues. And then that's how I got so heavily involved in all this. Then I started writing books. I tried to publish papers in the journals, and they were blocking me from being published, even though I was right. They didn't like that. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll write books. But nobody reads books. So I'm like, okay, fine, then I'll make a YouTube channel. And that's how I got on the internet.
Story of your life. I love it. All right. Here's another question. What foods, actually, I'm seeing one in the comments right now. What causes low platelets? All of a sudden, my platelets started going down last year. Peter?
All right. Well, you want me to do that one or you want me to do this thing first?
Either one, your choice. Dealer's
All right.
choice.
Well, let me do this question first. It's kind of a good intro question. What foods need to be eaten every day, and what amounts that illustrate a good diet? Okay. I think Dr. McDougall was the greatest doctor who ever lived. And out of all my years of being a doctor, over 30 years, the most important thing I ever learned is what Dr. McDougall said: eat a starch-based diet. And I tell you that because you're going to hear a lot of nutrition experts on the internet saying, oh, this is my favorite this, my favorite that. But I think that's not enough for the patient. You have to know, how can I turn my world around from being fat and sick to being healthy and thin? All right. And McDougall says, eat 90% of your calories from starch. What is a starch? A starch is a plant food that is a polymer of glucose wrapped in fiber. So what are the starches? Potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, beans, quinoa, oatmeal, wheat, and then the other grains, millet, amaranth, and all that stuff, sorghum, etc. Okay, so that's what you got to do. Eat 90% of your calories from that, and then get about 5% of those calories from vegetables, 5% from fruit. That's a starting point. You just start out doing that. Whatever else you're doing before, you probably weren't doing anything anywhere near as good as that. That'll probably improve your health. And then you can keep reading and going along. If you exercise a lot, I still exercise a lot. I'm 61 years old, but I exercise a lot. So I eat more fruits than that. I probably eat in the ballpark of 35% of calories from fruit. Somebody who doesn't exercise as much, though, might have a tendency to put on weight if they're eating that much fruit. But then, I'll try to eat a salad every day. And that works. And that's pretty simple to do. So the question is, why do people quit doing a diet? Because they can't satisfy their hunger. Starches are great for satisfying hunger. They're the best food to satisfy hunger. And so that's partly why the low-fat, vegan, starch-based diet is so easy to sustain the rest of your life, is because the starches satisfy your hunger. So you have to find a starch that you like. Like some people might say, well, rice is boring. I'm like, well, then combine the rice with, combine it with beans. You can combine the rice with blueberries. You can combine the rice with regular potatoes. Rice is kind of like water. It's pretty easy to eat. You can just eat even potatoes. Dr. McDougall even says, if you want to try the ultimate in dietary therapy, your last chance to turn things around, he says, just eat only sweet potatoes for 4 months with water and take a vitamin B12. That's the ultimate you could do in dietary therapy for almost anything. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is figure out how to satisfy your hunger and, keep it simple. You don't have to do all this fancy stuff. If you want, you can make things more fancy, but I'm really simple. I just want to eat fast and then get back to whatever else I'm interested in.
Okay, so cause of low platelets. This is a topic, but why don't you jump on it for a second?
There's different things that can cause low platelets. It could be advanced disease. Like you could have cirrhosis of the liver with portal hypertension, meaning the liver is so scarred in and fibrotic that it's causing back pressure on the portal veins that connect the liver to the spleen. And then because of the back pressure, the spleen will enlarge. And the spleen is like the graveyard for red blood cells. It'll also chew up platelets and drop your platelet counts. You can get, autoimmune causes of idiopathic autoimmune thrombocytopenic purpura, okay? A bleeding disorder due to your platelets being chewed up for an autoimmune disorder. So you can go see a hematologist, a doctor that specializes in blood, and they're going to test you. Do you have one of these autoimmune diseases? They're going to check you out. Do you have cirrhosis? Do you have any known risk factor for cirrhosis? Those are some of the things. The other thing I do is whenever I encounter a problem that's relatively uncommon, you just type in the internet, what is the differential diagnosis for low platelets? And you're going to see it pop up like 5 or 10 things, and then ask yourself which one of those seems most likely, and then bring that list to your doctor and ask them to go through it with you, and they'll do whatever tests are relevant. You want to know the cause of it and see if there's a cure for it. Plus, you want to know how low your platelets are. If they start getting below 20, you can spontaneously bleed. You don't want that. You might even end up needing a platelet transfusion. But hopefully you can figure out what the problem is and fix it so that you don't need medications or surgery.
Okay. The truth about protein intake. You've already spoken about this a little bit. For active individuals looking to lose weight, 1 gram per kilo. And is it true vegans need 35% more protein per pound? All right. You talked about this a little. You want to?
Well, I can add just a little bit here because I do think people eat way, way, way too much protein. And if you look at kidney failure patients, first of all, some people say, well, Americans are eating about 100 grams a day, and that if you eat a low, let's call it a low protein diet to help protect your kidneys, because tons of people are in mild kidney failure, like stage 3 kidney failure is very common. That means a glomerular filtration rate between 30 to 60. A low protein diet is 0.6 grams per kilogram per day. Okay. And that'll slow things down a little bit, but not that much. To really slow down the progression of kidney failure, you want to eat a very low protein diet, which is half of that, 0.3 grams per kilogram per day. And the point I was making, some people freak out about that. Oh my God, that's so low. But Kempner was having patients eat about that much for a long time, and they're doing very well without even supplementing them with essential amino acids or keto analogs. But you can supplement them with amino acids, essential amino acids, or keto analogs. So that's all doable. But what I'm trying to say here is I think people are eating far too much protein. And there's a lot of problems with that. T. Colin Campbell said animal protein's the number one carcinogenic food known to mankind. Animal protein increases total cholesterol. I think it ramps up the body's anabolic production desire. So you start sending this cholesterol out into the blood. It increases cholesterol levels. It's associated with decreased longevity. It's atherogenic. It's nephrotoxic. It causes osteoporosis. It increases the risk of kidney failure. I think high protein diet is totally overrated. Oh, one last thing too. I think a high protein diet can actually predispose to weight gain. And let me explain what that's about. This comes out of the work of James Mitchell, PhD. He's a Harvard scientist. He's got a lecture. You can go to it. It's on the internet on YouTube at the Wilhelmi, the Buchinger, Buchinger, Wilhelmi Clinic. And here's what he says. If you're eating a low protein diet, then you've got less amino acids available for the liver to use to make glucose through gluconeogenesis. So the liver has to find another source material to make glucose out of. So he says what it does is it takes the fat. The liver will then have fat called to it. You take a triglyceride, which has a backbone of glycerol, and then 3 fatty acids attached to it, okay? It wants the glycerol backbone. That's 3 carbons, like a propane triol. That will go to the liver, and that can be made into glucose for gluconeogenesis. Now, it has nothing to do with these 3 fatty acids, so it just burns them, kind of like brown fat, burns them for heat. So what he says is that causes weight loss. And again, what did I say is the path to increased longevity from the calorie restriction schema is calorie restriction, starvation. No, we don't want to do that. That's no fun. Protein restriction, we can do that just by becoming a vegan. Better yet, if we restrict methionine, perhaps that's going to be the long-term smart way to increase longevity. Okay, so anyways, the more protein you eat, you're going to probably be eating more methionine, and you're going to probably be, losing that game of caloric restriction for longevity.
I agree with you right there. And even McDougall advised limiting protein. He said 1 cup of beans a day, or 2, but skip them the next day. So he was also not on the protein bandwagon. Okay, I'm going back to the comments on the video. I'm going to kind of go back and forth between people who sent me questions and people who post them. Regarding someone who wants to do resistance training, you often mention during the first year of life, a baby consumes 5 to 7% of calories from protein, which corresponds approximately. Okay, so it looks like another protein question. During the fastest period of human growth. Go ahead.
This is a good question. I see where this guy's going. Normally, I think it's best to minimize your protein almost as much as you can. It's like Nathan Pritikin and Dr. McDougall both said it's impossible to be too low in protein. Okay, but there is a special circumstance. Let's say you have an open wound. You had a diabetic foot amputation or a traumatic injury, and you need to heal a big wound. Well, then you want to increase more protein. You do want to have more protein through that brief interval because your body is going to need that because it's rebuilding all that tissue. How much protein do you need as a weightlifter? That's a tough question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if you need any more protein, okay? Because a lot of these sort of hunter-gatherer peoples and local farmers, subsistence farmers like the, Tarahumara in northern Mexico, they're not taking protein supplements. The Yanomamo in South America, they're not taking protein supplements. They're not a bunch of bodybuilders, though, either. So the bottom line is I don't know the answer to that question. I would doubt it's that much. And I would just make sure you're doing some endurance exercise as well, not just all weightlifting. I mean, weightlifting is good to maintain your strength, but I like high intensity training. And what I mean by that is if you have to go upstairs, why not go up those stairs as fast as you can? It's like a free health club. Okay. If you got to park at the store, if it's a good neighborhood, park farther. When you're at home and you have to go to the bathroom, go to whatever makes you take the most steps. If you live in an apartment, get something a little bit higher on the floors, take the steps every day. I don't know, take the elevator down the basement, then go back up the steps. What I'm saying is analyze your day every 30-minute increment and say, how can I get more exercise in here? How can I challenge myself? Because I think physically what happens is the older you get, your body's a use it or lose it system with limited resources. If you don't force yourself to do things that require strength, agility, and endurance every day, you're going to lose those qualities. But as far as answering his question, do we need more protein if we're lifting weights? I doubt you need much, but I don't know the answer specifically.
Okay. So the next question, is it healthy for a high carb, low fat vegan woman to donate blood regularly as long as hemoglobin and blood pressure are okay?
Well, if your hemoglobin and your blood pressure are okay, then you're probably okay donating the blood. They're going to check your serum ferritin, make sure that that's reasonable. They're going to check your hematocrit, the number of red blood cells you have in your blood before you donate the blood. The only reason, some people recommend donating blood is to lower your hematocrit. It's like a menstruation equivalent, and that'll lower your risk of hypertension because you'll have a lesser amount of red blood cells in your blood, meaning your blood will be less thick, lower blood viscosity, and you don't need as much blood pressure to pump blood that's more water-like, less milkshake-like. So the people I know that donate blood do it for cardioprotective effects. But, this lady here who wrote this comment, she might be doing it just because she wants to be altruistic, to help other people. That's nice. Okay. So as long as your blood pressure and hemoglobin okay, and your serum ferritin and whatnot's okay, they'll probably let you donate. And they think that you don't have any other diseases or any problems. They'll probably let you do it.
So here's another question. It's got some specific blood pressure numbers of a range that it goes up and down for this woman. Check what she's saying here at age 66, and she's asking about a drug.
Well, Dr. McDougall, I've heard him say that unless a person was consistently, repeatedly a systolic of 160 or higher with measurements at home over the course of several months, he would not give it. So she's saying that a lot of times her pressure is only 125 to 130 systolic. If she's really stressed out, it goes up. But that's only when she's stressed out. So try to manage your stress as best, but you're not routinely stressed out. It sounds like your blood pressure is not that bad. I would do everything I could to keep it optimized. But me personally, I'm scared of pills. You drop your blood pressure too low, you could have a stroke. Your body's pretty well designed to regulate your blood pressure according to what you need to do in your context, when you're exercising, when you're stressed, or when you're sleeping, for example. So, if you need a pill, fine, take the pill. But I wouldn't take it unless I absolutely had to. And it sounds like right now she's doing pretty well with these types of numbers.
Good. So the micronutrient advisors cannot stop their obsessions. Is it fool's gold, and there seems to be a lot of contamination with them. Spices like cocoa have lead, pesticides, and so on.
Okay, this is sort of like two questions in one.
Yeah.
But first of all, I think I heard, Jeff, you had a really good lecture recently where you talked about, I think it was like your New Year's resolutions lecture or something like that. All these people in Okinawa, they don't meet the RDA recommendations for everything, and they're like the longest lived, energetic people around. I've seen these 105-year-old Okinawans doing push-ups.
Yeah, they're deficient, exactly.
Yeah, I think
they're living the longest.
Yeah, my deficiency is why I've lived 105. So I think these RDA or whatever the guidelines people are going by, they're all made too high because all of the people making the guidelines are chickens, okay? They're scared. Oh my gosh, if we make people deficient in something, they're going to say we're screwing up. So let's just give them a safety valve threshold. We'll just double the average amount, okay? That way we'll make sure we capture, 99.9% of the population. They're too high. So people are chasing these recommendations that are too high for protein and other things, and I think that's a mistake. Okay, then let me see the second part of the question because it was a little bit different. Oh, contaminations. Contaminations are very common in anything that's a powder because if you sell a powder, you're selling it for weight. And there's a lot of like spices sold as powder, ginger, turmeric, etc. And there were some couple of articles in Consumer Reports where they show what percentage of them are contaminated by heavy metals. They'll put lead in them. There's something called lead chromate that's yellow. They'll put that in turmeric so it weighs more. They can sell it for more and make more money. So I actually would never eat anything in a powder form because I'm always scared they're going to contaminate. Lots of protein powders. There's another Consumer Reports article about heavy metal contaminants in protein powders. Tons of them are contaminated by heavy metals. I would never eat anything in a powder form.
All right, here's the next one. If I eat spinach, which has oxalates and prevents calcium absorption, along with, say, collard greens, which does not have oxalates, does spinach interfere with calcium absorption from collard greens? In other words, should they not be eaten together?
And I would say it's a non-issue. Dr. McDougall had studied calcium quite extensively, and here's his final statement on it. It's impossible with any plant-based diet to be calcium deficient. Impossible. And that's one thing I laugh too, like about the Bantu women. Before modern birth control, the typical amount of children a woman would have, let's say before 1900 or before 1950, would be 10 children. That's the same way in Victorian England, and it's the same way with the Bantus in South Africa, okay? So here's what's funny about it. These Bantu women would typically have about 10 children. They would typically nurse the baby for about 3 years. They only drink the equivalent of one little tiny cup of milk a day. They don't drink milk at all. They largely plant foods. So what I'm trying to say is the Bantu women, they don't have any problem with osteoporosis. Who has a problem with osteoporosis? Little old white ladies who drink milk, okay? The animal protein is highly acidic because it has a different amino acid composition, more methionine, for example. Part of its metabolism of the sulfur component is to make it into sulfuric acid. That's then excreted by the kidneys, and the kidneys use calcium to buffer the acid, and they simultaneously excrete them both, the calcium and the hydrogen protons, the acid. And they pull that calcium from the bones. They pull calcium also from the muscles. So you get bone wasting, osteoporosis. You pee your bones on the toilet. You also get muscle wasting. It makes you weaker. That's another reason why I thought this eat more protein stuff is exaggerated, because you're going to have more calciuria. It increases your risk of calcium precipitation in the kidneys for kidney failure, increases your risk of calcium forming stones in the kidneys, which can be really painful. So it's pretty overrated.
Next question. This has to do with cholesterol again. Low-fat, plant-based nutritional therapist with familial cholesterolemia. I adhere to a clean, low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet myself. In addition to teaching it, however, I've not been able to get my LDL below 130. Do you agree with Dr. Clapper that the damage is caused by inflammation and I should not worry? Or according to Dr. Greger, I should be taking statins? So far, I've refused statins and stuck to my healthy lifestyle.
It's a bit of a tough question. First of all, I'll just let you know, I'm not a big fan of statins. Okay, if you look at statins, they inhibit electron transport on the inner mitochondrial membrane. Okay, and to make your coenzyme Q, for example. Well, you want to have good mitochondrial function, because what's the mechanism for diabetes? The diabetes mechanism is to have inhibition of the electron transport chain of mitochondria, especially by sat fat, because the increased electron carriers you get with sat fat compared to unsaturated fats. But anyways, an electron transport backs up. So what I'm saying is you're doing something that's somewhat similar to the mechanism for most common cause of diabetes, excessive sat fat intake. So I wouldn't want to do that. Statins increase your risk of diabetes. Also, you need a lot of energy in your muscles. They run the risk of weakening your muscles too, and lowering your coenzyme Q, which is an important part of the electron transport chain. I'm not a big fan of statins. If you look at their so-called absolute benefit instead of their relative risk benefits, so to speak, there's a lot of problems with them. So I'm not too enthusiastic with them. I would see what else you could do to optimize your lipids, and maybe you're going to have to do something. But me personally, I'm not a big fan of statins.
Great. So here is somebody talking about juicing, about Dr. Stefan Esser. I've had at my event many times. Great guy. They make fresh juice at home. So the question is, how does Dr. Rogers feel about fresh juicing? Not a juice fast, but fresh juice added to a diet. Is it a bad idea, or maybe before or after physical activity?
I think that the good thing about juicing and making smoothies and all that is it gets you to eat more fruits and vegetables. And I think that's a good thing. Okay. What's the bad thing about it? Because you grind up the food, you're sort of pre-digesting it, and you will accelerate the rate at which your blood sugar comes up. Less of the fiber gets to the colon, but that's not so much the problem. I just don't also like the blender. The main thing that bothers me, you're still going to get fiber to your colon. The main thing I don't like is it's so loud. I'm real sensitive to noise. So I would say at least get those ear protectors because you're going to make yourself deaf. I think it's okay, but it's better to eat the food. But if you can't motivate yourself to eat the food, then go ahead and make a smoothie. And I realize some people like it for the convenience. They make a smoothie and then they drink it, at work for lunch. So I think it's okay.
I've always thought if you're trying to lose weight, don't drink your calories, chew your calories if you're trying to lose weight, because otherwise you're adding calories quickly when you're drinking them. Let's switch over to the questions that came in on email, just trying to be fair to all people here. We did this one already, right? Yes. Looking for plant-based coaching certification, not extremely expensive, but workable. Retired nurse, worked with integrative medicine since the 70s. Like to add to my repertoire. Novice at work, probably follow plant-based diet for 2 years. Find it most difficult when socializing, listening to family opinions. Love to teach. Currently teach meditation for health at our local rec center, looking for certification for ongoing personal knowledge and to be used to teach in the public forum. I've followed Ornish, Bernard, Esselstyn, McDougall, Collins. So do you have a recommendation for any of these coaching certificate programs?
Well, I know that Dr. T. Colin Campbell has a certificate. He's a very bright guy. His book, China Study, was a great book. His other books were good. So you might want to go for the T. Colin Campbell one that's out of, Cornell University. Yeah. I would love to make one of these. I'm just so busy, though. I could easily make the course, but I couldn't manage it. I don't have the time or the entrepreneurial skills. But I would like to do that. That'd be fun. So
here's another one question. What non-health related practices, for example, journaling, meditation, do you believe can also significantly enhance physical health? What small, seemingly insignificant daily habit do you think can lead to significant long-term health benefits? And how do you personally handle stress in a sustainable way?
Well, I think one of the most important things you do is you have to ask yourself, what do I want to do with my life? Basically, we spend about 1/3 of our life asleep. We spend another third of it doing something to make money. And, maybe you can change what you do to make money. Maybe you can't. The older you get, the harder it is to change. And then the other third, you have to decide what you want to do. So you have to have a driving purpose. And having that clear in mind enables you to focus your energy and be more efficient at it. Okay, so if you're a mother, your goal might be to be the best mother you can to help your kids. That's great. If you're a coach, to do the best you can to help your team. Okay, so for me, for example, I work a lot as a clinical doctor full time, and then I love all this nutrition and health stuff, and I know that it's the most powerful thing to help people. And I enjoy studying it and writing in it and making videos in it. So that's what I do as my hobby. And it makes me happy to do that. I know it gives me a lot of energy because I'm trying to answer questions. And the fact that there's going to be other people that either read my book or see my video, that energizes me to do it. And that gives me a lot of energy. So then also, I have family obligations and I try to meet those obligations. But there's not much time else for that. So you basically only have time for 1 or 2 hobbies. That's it. That's your life. So what I'm saying is because you're doing good and you're doing something important, that will make you happy and it'll help you to endure all the sad things. Because we all go through sad things. Our parents die, other sad things happen in our life. And that just makes you more resilient. If you're good and you're doing good and your energy is well focused and your life is purposeful and meaningful, that makes you happy. So that's good. Because like Arthur Schopenhauer had said, forget about having a happy life. Try to have a heroic life, meaning live up to your highest expectations for yourself. Because when you do that, you like yourself and it makes you happy. Like my kid said to me one time, he goes, "Dad, why are you so happy? Your life sucks. Out of everybody in the whole family, your life sucks worse than anybody else. All you do is work at the hospital, then you come home, you write your books, you make your videos. That's like all you do, Dad. Why don't you go to the beach with Mom?" And I'm like, "I don't want to stay at the beach all day. I can just go out in the sun for half hour and get some sunshine." "Well, why don't you go to this restaurant?" I don't like eating the food at that restaurant, Everybody's like, I said, I'm happy because I know who I am. It's been said, an animal is happiest when it does what it's meant to do. James Watson said that too. Watson said that. A horse is happy when it runs. Okay, I'm a scholar. A scholar is happy when he writes and teaches and, you know, does research and stuff. That makes him happy. So that's why I'm happy. Okay, I know my purpose and I live up to it. I fulfilled my destiny. I promised my mother and myself and God I would be the best doctor and scientist I could be, and I am. Okay, and I didn't sell out, and I'm proud of that too. So anyways, that's how you find meaning for yourself. Religion can help people find meaning. Christianity, for example, that we're all created in the image of God, and we're all sort of in this cosmic struggle between good and evil, and do your part in whatever way that is. That also makes you happy. And like I said too, the idea of Schopenhauer that, you know, forget about a happy life, seek a heroic life. If you do that, you'll be happy. You just have to figure out what it is for you. And then being time management, like paradoxically, things like wasting time, they don't make you happy. They actually kind of make you frustrated with yourself. You're like, gee, I just wasted the whole day. That doesn't make you happy. Knowing that you did something good with your day, that makes you happier. Exercise helps. Exercise creates a sleep drive. If you've exercised during the day, when you put your head down on the pillow, you're more likely to sleep deeply. So those are other things that help.
Great. Next question is regarding the so-called red light therapy, which sports several purveyors making broad claims and garnering favorable testimonials. So what's your opinion? Do you have one on this red light therapy?
Yeah, I looked into it one time, and my concern was that there's potential issues with it for, I saw some things that it might be damaging to the eyes potentially, that there were some potential side effects about it. So I just kind of lost interest in it. I had heard some good things about it. I know there's some neurosurgeon guy, I think, you know, Cruz or something. His name is KRUSE, who promotes it. But I didn't see enough benefit to make it worth studying. You know, maybe I'm wrong. I haven't thoroughly studied it, but I saw potential for side effects, and I didn't think it was something I needed to do. So I didn't go any further with it.
Yeah. All right. Oh, 10 questions. Well, you can pick one or two to answer. Mushrooms, good for us.
I don't eat any mushrooms because they're too darn confusing. I know there's some theoretical benefits of them, but I can't tell them apart. I'm afraid I'll eat the wrong one. So I just say, forget it. I don't need mushrooms. I get everything I need without mushrooms. So why bother dealing with that?
Okay. Number 3, is it okay to eat oatmeal every day, even though it's 16% fat?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, 16% fat's not that bad. I try to keep my total fat below 10%. Mine's probably in the ballpark of around 6 or 7% or 6%. It's low. I like to keep it as low as possible, but oatmeal's reasonable. I used to eat a lot of oatmeal. I used to like it with blueberries, just, you know, plain oatmeal with blueberries and reverse osmosis water. And I'll just give you an example. Like a typical animal food would be like salmon, okay? 50% of calories from fat, 50% of calories from protein. There's no carbohydrate in animal food other than milk. So those are really high in fat. So what I'm basically saying is oatmeal's okay, especially if your weight is good.
Okay. I'm just picking through here. Some of these we already talked about. Arsenic. How do you feel about water fasting? 3 to 5 days every month or quarter?
Well, I have heard some good things about fasting through True North. Also from, you know, Jeff has had some really good experience with fasting, but I don't do it. I personally don't fast because I got to eat, I got to work. And I just haven't felt the need to do it, but I have heard good things about it. I sort of think the most important thing is what you eat every day. You know, fasting for a couple of days here and there, you know, maybe for some people there's some benefits of that, but I think the most important thing is just eat good food every day, and I don't really think about it too much.
So what's your take on eating raw garlic medicinally is another question.
I don't know if that might irritate your esophagus a little bit to just eat it raw. I haven't pursued that route. I've heard a lot of good things about garlic. And if, like, you know, my old cook used to put it in my food, I would eat it. I don't eat it anymore, but I don't.
Russian penicillin or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Moringa tea. Moringa tea.
I don't drink any types of tea because tea can concentrate fluoride. It can concentrate aluminum, and it has caffeine in it. So I don't ever drink tea.
I don't know what a Cleary AI angiogram. What is that?
I don't even know what that is. Anytime angio means blood vessel, gram is like to image, but it sounds like maybe some new form of screening or something. I'm not familiar with it, but like I said, for every patient that becomes a vegan, there's like 100,000 that go for some stupid test. You don't cure a disease by taking a picture of it. I'm serious. Every single day, there's lines of people around the block at all the major Western hospitals going for ultrasounds, CAT scans, MRIs, X-rays, colonoscopies, all these tests. And like, how many of them are willing to become a low-fat vegan? So that's what fixes almost all the chronic problems. Why wouldn't you do that? Instead, they spend thousands of dollars. They get radiated. They get tubes up their butt. You don't cure disease by taking a picture of it. You cure it by fixing the problem. And the problem for most people is their diet and exposure to toxins, and getting enough sleep.
Okay, here's a little longer one. 74-year-old woman, 5'6", 95 pounds, active, low fat, 15 years familial hyperlipidemia. Despite my diet, cholesterol remains somewhat elevated. Total cholesterol 183, 197, APOB 9198, LDL 95, 110. Recent CT scan carotid ultrasound showed mild plaque. Let's see. Is there a way to tell if my plaque is from past dietary damage or if I still have active atherosclerosis? Given my high LPA, should I consider low-dose statin? As a thin person who struggles to maintain weight while avoiding high-fat, sugary foods, do you have any calorie-dense, heart-healthy food suggestions?
Yeah, so her total cholesterol is not that high, 183 to 197. I know she's got a little bit of an LPA. Like I said too, Esselstyn says anybody who completely followed his diet, and he's got many, many hundreds of patients, they never had a problem. So I would follow his diet to the letter. And I would eat the lower fat versions of all the starches, for example. So this would be an example of somebody who I would definitely say, stick with the white rice, the potatoes, sweet potatoes, and for beans, lentils, because they're all really low in fat. And, avoid the garbanzos, avoid the oatmeal. And I would, again, do as much as I could, make sure you were maxed out on all that, be well hydrated and all that. I would only go to pills, and, maybe she'll need pills, but I would only go to them as a last resort. It's sort of like the same answer to all the questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, a quarter of the population has an elevated Lp(a), something like that. That would suggest that a quarter of the people in the Esselstyn study probably have an elevated LPA if they're just like everybody else, and yet they're having, great success. So yeah, you can look at the numbers and you can worry, is this number, is that number? Well, maybe all of the people, I know they're talking about doing a test of Lp(a) to see if that's the case. Because if that's the case, then these people who have been doing great for decades following his diet, it looks like it's not a factor for them.
Yeah, I also remember when you went on that fast, your LPA came down.
Yeah, I cut it almost like 46% or something like that in a 10-day fast. And I tested my blood. I did it like 6 weeks after the fast because they tell you to wait for a little while. There's some turbulence or whatever for everything to settle. And I did it 6 months later. I did it in July, and it's still exactly where it was after the fast. So it remained low.
Yeah, plus they've done autopsy studies, like let's say autopsy studies in Africa, plant-based populations. It's like nobody's dying of coronary artery disease. So the point I'm saying is, with all these people with elevated LPAs and familial hyperlipidemias, how come we don't hear about all their MIs and all these other areas? We don't hear about it when they're on plant-based diets. So.
Yeah. Okay, for me, I sort of just answered this one. Yes, I took it 6 months later, 6 weeks later, 6 months later. Somebody had a dental appointment because of gum disease, recommended a saliva test, $200. Results of the test indicated out of 11 types of bacteria, 2 were very elevated. The dentist told him he has high levels of bacteria, could lead to other problems such as diabetes, heart disease, dementia, cancer. Do you know about this saliva test, Peter?
No, I'm not familiar with it. And then he says, swish your mouth with coconut oil and a grain of rock salt. That's called oil pulling. Brush your teeth with xylitol, prothrombotic. Take a prebiotic, probiotic for immune support. No one else has ever recommended this. All I know is I can tell you when I was young, I didn't like going to the dentist and the slow drill. So I said, I don't want this to ever happen again. I read like 5 books on dentistry right there. And I just never, ever have sweets. I never have things that are acidic, like orange juice is very acidic. It causes cavities. I will never have that. Soda pop was acidic. That causes cavity. This is before I became a vegan. I quickly, around that time, right away became a lacto vegetarian. And then I became 100% vegan about 7 years ago. But what I'm trying to say is I've never gone back to the dentist since then. That was about 28 years ago. So if you take really good care of your teeth, you're unlikely to ever have a problem. And I wouldn't necessarily get into all this crazy stuff.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to go back to.
Oh, I just add one little thing about teeth.
Yep.
at night, your saliva production is reduced. So make sure your teeth are clean before you go to bed. It's good to floss, use those interdental brushes. You might want to brush your teeth. The problem with brushing your teeth, though, is there's so many problems in all the toothpaste. But have your teeth as clean as you can get them before you go to sleep at night. That way you don't have a particle of food sitting in between them. That's more predisposing to cavities. But if you avoid all the acidics and you avoid all the sweets and you clean your teeth at night, you're unlikely to ever have a problem.
So 2 questions. One is, are there multiple causes of brain fog? And then the one above that says, someone mentioned resistance training. I'm 60-year-old female, fit, around 18 to 20% body fat, lifting weights since 27 years old with a few breaks, work out at home. Don't want to lose more body fat, but I know my muscle mass is decreasing in the last few years. Do you think I should be increasing protein? Okay, here's a protein question again.
Yeah. We already pretty much talked about protein. The main thing I want to say is I think you should just do more physical exercise. And you can even do isometrics, just whatever it takes. You can get those little curls. Do curls for the girls, benches for the wenches. Just do some type of exercise. Do push-ups. You don't need to buy much weights. I think it's good to have little dumbbells for doing curls. And do a little bit of a higher rep set. So it's easier on your arms, and there's a little bit of endurance built into that. You'll get some physical strength from that. Push-ups are pretty easy to do. You can do other isometrics. The reason I'm saying all this stuff about isometrics and stuff is that it's cheap. Anybody could do it. If you want, you can join the gym, get a membership, but most people don't like going, and they end up not going, and they waste the money, and their credit card's stuck on there, and they get billed for a couple extra months. All you got to do is just, right when you come home from work out for a quick 15, 20 minutes, half hour, and challenge yourself. Push-ups, curls, some static isometrics or something. That's good enough. I mean, if you're able to lift weights more, that's fine, but I don't think you need to do too much to stay pretty strong, because I've gone through phases where that's all I do, and I maintain my strength pretty well. And then always write it down. Have a little training journal where you write down how many push-ups, curls, squats, or whatever exercise you're doing, so you know that your strength is good. If you see that you're getting weaker and weaker, there's a problem. Try to figure out what it is.
So here's a question. Intermittent fasting, is it hard on the heart for an 84-year-old with a heart murmur?
Actually, there was a question below that lady's question. Can we see what that is? Because I thought there was something good about it. I forgot what it was, but I remember I had a
multiple causes of brain fog.
Brain fog. Yeah, that's sort of my element here. Brain fog. Okay, well, we kind of talked about that earlier. If you're holding a cell phone to your head, that's going to increase your risk of brain fog. If you're eating high-fat meals, increase risk of brain fog. If you got leaky gut, increase risk of brain fog. If you're eating processed food with all the MFG, monosodium glutamate, manufactured-free glutamate, increase risk of brain fog. Aspartame, the sweetener, increase risk of brain fog. Excitotoxins like glyphosate, you're eating non-organic soy products or other things sprayed with glyphosate. It's an excitotoxin. That would include even beans and oatmeal, if they're not organic, they could be sprayed with glyphosate, which is a brain toxin, a gut toxin, and a leaky gut, leaky blood-brain barrier potential contributor to all that. Filter your water, reverse osmosis for your drinking water, because otherwise you got fluoride and you got aluminum in there. Those are both brain toxins. So most people are exposed to tons of brain toxins. Don't ever eat processed food because they put mold inhibitors in there. Mold inhibitors are fungal inhibitors. Fungal inhibitors very routinely are electron transport inhibitors in the inner mitochondrial membrane. They're mitochondrial inhibitors. You need to have the ability to produce a lot of energy in your mitochondria in order to have optimal brain function. So those are typical examples. A lot of medicines are mitochondrial inhibitors. I actually figured this out because I went through all my biochemistry books. I own about 7 biochemistry books. There was nothing on mitochondrial inhibitors, but I knew it was an important mechanism of brain cell damage. So I started going through all the literature, and I quickly found like 60 mitochondrial inhibitors. Lots of them are real common. A lot of these psychiatric medicines, they basically cause a slow chemical lobotomy. SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors for depression, mitochondrial inhibitors. Haldol, antipsychotics, mitochondrial inhibitors. Statins, mitochondrial inhibitors. Metformin, diabetes drug, mitochondrial inhibitor. A lot of antibiotics, aminoglycosides, fluoroquinolones, beta-lactams. They're all mitochondrial inhibitors. Anti-epilepsy drugs, mitochondrial inhibitors. Propofol, mitochondrial inhibitor. Lasix, mitochondrial inhibitor. Tylenol, mitochondrial inhibitor. So lots of people are exposed to tons of these things. They're super common. Fluoride, mitochondrial inhibitor. Bisphenol A, estrogenic, mitochondrial inhibitor. Atrazine, mitochondrial inhibitor. It's sprayed on the the non-organic corn. Super common. So people are getting nickel and dime to death, and they don't even know what's happening. And that's again why I like this idea of being a minimalist. Eat the good organic whole foods, keep it simple, and avoid all this stuff as much as you can. I think you'd be in pretty good shape if you do that.
All right, great advice. Let's see here. Fasting, and can leaky gut be cured by following a plant-based diet?
Quite often it can, because the main problem quite often is a lack of dietary fiber. The good bacteria in your gut, they take the dietary fiber and they convert it into short-chain fatty acids, in particular butyrate. That's a 4-carbon fatty acid. Okay, and then the gut lining cells are called enterocytes because the gut's called the enteric tract. They use the butyrate to make tight junctions to keep the cells tightly opposed to each other so you don't get any leak between the cells. The other things that can get you in trouble is saturated fat predisposes to leaky gut. Omega-6 cooking oils predispose to leaky gut. Excessive psychological stress can vasoconstrict the arteries to the gut, and that can lead to leaky gut. Lots of chemicals in processed food are emulsifiers. They can contribute to leaky gut. Carrageenan increases the risk of leaky gut. Some medications do, like nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory NSAIDs drugs. Aspirin increases the risk of that. Antibiotics disrupt the gut flora. They increase the risk of that. Things in the water designed to sanitize your water, like fluoride and chlorine, they will also increase your risk of leaky gut. That's another reason why it's good to filter your water. So I made videos about all the causes of leaky gut, and what you want to do is avoid all of them as best you can, especially if you're having a problem like an autoimmune disease or something else, or you're worried about a thrombotic event, because when you get leaky gut, you get those bacterial endotoxins in your blood. They're prothrombotic. There's a guy by the name of Douglas Kell, a PhD from England, and he was working with Etheresia praetorius. She's a lady, PhD from South Africa. They wrote some really good papers about postprandial endotoxemia causing a hypercoagulability of the blood. It changes the shape of fibrinogen, a blood clotting protein. It undergoes what's called an amyloid transformation. Instead of being alpha helix like a cylinder, it becomes flat. That's called a beta pleated sheet secondary protein structure, and then they all stick together. They stack up on each other, and they're real predisposed to thrombosis, okay? So, when something precipitates out of solution in the blood, that means it clots. What is atherosclerosis? Atherosclerosis is a blood clot. So what I'm saying is leaky gut predisposes to atherosclerosis and occluding arteries. I actually think that's a contributor to microvascular angina and to cognitive decline. So that's another good reason why you want to prevent leaky gut. So I would go through the checklist, avoid everything on there, and as best you can, and that'll minimize your risk of leaky gut and all these problems.
So here's one right at the top. It says, what is the latest thinking about breast implant illness and silicone heavy metals microgel leaks into circulatory system? Any treatments other than explant the implants?
Yeah, that's a tough one because silicone, it's tough to image and it's tough to get out of the body. I don't know if there's anything that can chelate it. I know there's some people who've done work on that, but I don't know if they've had that good of results and been able to, because the silicone can break into small pieces and go all over the place, and it can be difficult to remove it from the body. I'm not sure how to do that. There's the same old story of be as healthy as you can, and then the optimal health of the rest of your body gives you more reserve to compensate for whatever problem you have. But the bottom line is, I don't know how to get that silicone out of the body, and that's sort of a fundamental problem there. I don't think anybody does know, though. I did try to read about that about a year and a half ago, and I searched around, and I couldn't find anything good on how to get it out of the body.
So my question, will the plant-based diet eventually reverse the cataract? Okay, this is a cataract question. I guess this was from a previous question. Glaucoma for years, like cataract in one eye. Been using drops in my eyes for years for the pressure. Last March, I got off the keto carnivore diet and switched to a plant-based diet. I've lost 25 pounds and cholesterol is down from 245 to 180. Will the plant-based diet eventually reverse the cataract and also reduce the pressure on my eyes? I stopped using the drops in March when I changed my diet. Have not seen the eye doctor since.
Well, it's not going to reverse the cataract that you have, but you can prevent it from progressing. I'll just tell you my story because it totally relates to this. I went to my eye doctor, and this was about 25 years ago. And he goes, Pete, you've got mild cataracts 25 years ago. And I said, oh, really? How did I get that? And he said, well, I don't know. Maybe it's from radiation. I worked as an imaging guided surgeon. And I said, I doubt it. I was always super careful about it, but I got some exposure. And he goes, well, maybe it's from your contact lenses. I said, well, why could I get cataract from my contact lenses? And he says, well, they used to have the contact lens solution would contain a mercury chemical called thimerosal. Okay. And he says, if you put that on your eyes, because that's used to prevent infections on your cataracts, he said that could lead to causing cataracts. And I said, well, I only used those for about 2-3 years. And then I got giant cell blephary, conjunctivitis from it. And so I had to quit using them. So I only used them for a brief amount of time, and I hardly ever wore them. I thought they were kind of a pain in the butt, so I didn't like wearing them. So I almost never wore them. And I said, so anyways, like, oh crap, am I screwed? I'm going to end up with cataracts, have to have cataract surgery. What a pain in the butt that is. Okay. So anyways, that was about the same time that I started becoming healthier and healthier. I became first a lacto-vegetarian because I was fat at the time too. I got up to 220 pounds briefly. And then I knew I had to turn my whole life around, and I became lacto-vegetarian at first, then 100% vegan. Anyways, the reason I tell you all this is my eyesight vision has not changed at all. I got the same prescription that I did, 27 years ago. So what I'm saying here is be as healthy as you can. Glaucoma is associated with hypertension. So if you optimize all your health parameters, your blood pressure will optimize. And then all these other eye diseases. What are the most common eye diseases? Hypertension, diabetes, age-related macular degeneration. They're all associated with vascular disease, hypertension and diabetes. So you prevent hypertension and diabetes by eating a low-fat, low-sodium vegan diet with no oil. So maybe you'll be able to just prevent it from progressing. You'll stay where you're at. I doubt you'll improve, but you'll be much less likely to progress.
Great. Regarding salts, have you read any of the salt books by David Brownstein? Of course, it's refined salts, yet another processed food we should avoid. So we've talked a little bit about salt. Also, do you have any insight and good ways to clear the body of parasites?
Okay, well, first of all, on the salt, a lot of people hear, oh, I'm worried about iodine deficiency. And iodine deficiency used to be a bigger deal in the past when people ate only local food, okay? And you could live in an area where there was low iodine in the soil, and if you eat everything local, you could have iodine deficiency, and you can get a goiter, which is an enlarged thyroid because it's compensating, growing, trying to be able to suck up more iodine from your blood. Okay, but here's the deal. In the modern world, people tend to buy their groceries, their food at the store, and it comes from all over the world. So there tends to be more than enough iodine in it. So iodine deficiency due to a lack of iodine intake is not as common as it used to be. What you have to watch out for is tons of people have leaky gut, and they've got autoimmune versions of Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, and that's damaging their thyroid function. They're also often being exposed to chemicals that are goitrogenic. All the halogens, we talked about that. Chloride, bromine, for example, fluoride. And then the other thing is too much soy exposure can also be goitrogenic. Cruciferous vegetables can contribute to that. Each one by itself, maybe not doing much, but all of them together potentially can be a big deal. I would especially fix the leaky gut because I think that's the strongest association, and fixing that might really help.
Great. Let's see. Ask my doctor about getting a calcium artery scan to check my levels of calcium. WFPB for 3 years, cholesterol below normal range, normal weight, no medications, exercise every day, weights and aerobics, yoga. Took Oscal calcium for years to help with bones. Early 70s now, stopped calcium supplements 6 years ago. Just want to know if my previous lifestyle and those awful supplements have accumulated plaque around my body. Thoughts?
Okay, a couple things. First of all, yeah, people who took calcium supplements over 1,400 milligrams a day had a 2.6 increased rate of dying from cardiovascular events. I thought that was funny. They're taking this supplement that they think is going to prevent osteoporosis, help them live longer, and it's making them die 2.6 times faster from cardiac disease. So I'm not aware of any supplement that you could take that's going to help you unless you are deficient in that thing. And most, what are people deficient in? They're usually deficient in stuff that comes from plant foods, from potassium, from magnesium, from fiber and antioxidants, okay, and nitrates. So eat your plant foods and you get all that stuff, okay? The only thing a vegan needs to take is B12. That typically a vegan needs to take. That's the only thing I take. But what I was also kind of laughing at is patients love going for tests. And I'm like, you don't understand a hospital. A hospital is a dangerous place. A hospital is something you want to avoid. For example, I don't go to the doctor. I don't go to the hospital because I go there to work, to make money. Hospital is a very dangerous place. Okay, the second thing is everybody else wants a test. Well, what if I have heart disease? My attitude is, of course you have heart disease. I guarantee you have heart disease. You don't need to check for it. What's the scan going to tell you? You're going to radiate yourself with the equivalent, I forget the exact dose, about 20,000 chest x-rays, just to know you got a little bit of calcium in your artery. So what? What are you going to do once you realize you have calcium in your artery? You're going to go low-fat, low-sodium vegan with no oil. Why not just go low-fat, low-sodium vegan with no oil anyways and not radiate yourself for nothing like an idiot?
All right. That's telling them. Let's see. Flax seeds. Okay. Any concrete evidence that flax seeds or oil are harmful for humans? It sounds like somebody, Brooke Goldner in there. Is this an argument waiting to happen, DHA? We've got a lot of video on this.
Yeah, I think actually the videos at your site about omega-3s were great. I think omega-3s are totally overrated. I mean, omega-3s, it's fat. It suppresses your immune system. Who wants a suppressed immune system? What removes cancer cells from your body? Your immune system. So do you want to suppress your immune cells? The other thing about it, it's been shown to increase the risk of prostate cancer. It increases the risk of metastatic cancer in animal studies. Omega-3 supplementation is associated with increased risk of atrial fibrillation, increased risk of becoming obese. It's liquid fat, okay? It's increased risk of insulin resistance. How is something that increases your risk of insulin resistance, obesity, atrial fibrillation going to make you healthier? I think they're totally overrated, omega-3 supplements. And let's see, there was something about flax. We talked about flax earlier, but it's like 60% fat. It's highly estrogenic. I haven't studied flax in as much detail. So we'll let that one go.
Right. I know. I have not looked into Brooke Goldner's protocol, which I know is higher fat, that people sometimes mention that to me.
I can give you my take on autoimmune disease. My attitude with autoimmune disease is most often they're due to leaky gut. So I would fix the leaky gut first, see if that's good enough to cure you. Secondarily, they can be due to toxins. You can have toxins that substitute for things in proteins, like glyphosate means glycine phosphate, okay? It's basically glycine plus a phosphate. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's essentially what it is. So you got a glycine molecule with a phosphate stuck on it. Well, what I would say is stop eating the glyphosate and see if that makes things better, okay? Stop with the fluoride. Fluoride in your water and in foods and in medications, that can also cause autoimmune disease. The way a toxin can cause autoimmune disease is it can damage a protein in your body and thus make it no longer recognized by your immune system, so your immune system reacts to it. It could also, like glyphosate, substitute for another molecule, like substitute for glycines in your collagen, for example, distort the shape of it, and that can potentially activate your immune system to have an autoimmune reaction to it. So avoid all that stuff as best you can and fix your leaky gut and see how it goes. And if you still haven't been able to resolve the problem and you think that a medication is necessary, try all this immune suppression through omega-3s. Maybe that'll help you. Maybe. And if it still doesn't work, then you can go with those autoimmune drugs. They're pretty powerful drugs. They're almost like chemotherapy drugs, methotrexate and these other ones. And that would be a least resort, because once you suppress your immune system, you might suppress your autoimmune disease, but you might also subsequently thus suppress your immune system to the point where it's not able to get the cancer out of your body. I personally think everybody has cancer. It's normal to have some cancer in your body, and your immune system just removes it. And forget about it. Most men are going to die with a turtle in their prostate. Okay. A turtle is a cancer that grows so slow, it's not going to kill you. And so what? I got a turtle in my prostate. Who cares? You don't want to know. I don't want a PSA test. I don't want a needle up my butt. I don't want to know. I just eat my low-fat vegan diet, along the Ornish study, those vegetarians, none of them bumped their PSA. Most of them lowered their PSAs. You don't want to know about turtles. Turtles are slow-growing cancers. They're not going to kill you. You don't want to know about them, because you go some screening tests that detects one, you might end up getting chemo and surgery for a turtle that never would have hurt you, and then you suffer and die from the chemo and the surgery. So some things it's better not to know.
Amen. Let's see. We're going past 2 hours here. Get a few more questions in. Let's see. Suggesting lower protein for health and longevity. We've talked about this.
Oh, yeah. And another thing, too, is like I sometimes hang around with younger guys and lift weights. Okay. I'm 61 years old. I can do more push-ups than all these young guys. I eat the lowest protein you could imagine, I used to eat more beans, but I've really cut down on the beans because it's too much of a pain in the butt to cook. Once my mother-in-law got sick a couple of years ago, and she could no longer cook for me. And so I was like, oh, crap. She used to make me a lot of beans, and I probably ate too many beans just because it was convenient. But then when she stopped cooking, I had to cook for myself, or I'd have to try to get my wife or my daughter to cook for me, and they're not as eager to cook for me, and I had less beans. All I'm trying to say was I had plenty of physical strength doing push-ups without having to eat any extra protein. Anyways, I still got good physical strength. I can still, run up 10 flights of stairs like it was nothing, and all the young people have a hard time keeping up with me. So what I'm trying to say is you get strong more so from exercising than from taking protein supplements. I think that's a bunch of BS. I don't think that's the way to go. It gets hyped because all this profitable commercial foods, a lot of times they're high in protein or they're high in fat or both, and you can sell supplements. But again, that's not what the healthy people do in these blue zone, third world places where they're living longer and they're stronger, and their old people could kick the butt off our old people. Okay.
All right. Well, let's see. A couple more here. What do we got? What does the science say about needle biopsies for tumors or enlarged lymph nodes? What are the correct criteria for getting such tests? Dr. Seyfried says it's dangerous because if there's cancer, they can seed the cancer. That is, increase the chances of metastasis. Is he right?
Okay, I'm kind of laughing. I'll tell you why I'm laughing. Because, the cancer business is big money in chemotherapy business. It's like the mafia, okay? They don't want any competition. All right. If somebody posts a video on Gerson therapy, they'll take that video down. Okay. If, John of God out in South America claims he cures a couple of cancers, all of a sudden he gets himself in big trouble. Okay. So why am I laughing? Seyfried is becoming very famous, and Thomas Seyfried, he did some good research on the metabolic theory of cancer. Okay. About, these different hybrid cells, showing that it was primarily an effect of the cytoplasm in the mitochondria rather than the DNA in a mutation. So he's basically supporting the mitochondrial theory of cancer, which I think is correct, related to the Otto-Warburg effect. Okay. With tissue mitochondrial injury induced by hypoxia versus the classical somatic mutation theory, SMT, that's in all the medical textbooks. All right. So I think Seyfried is right on that. But why do I think it's funny? Because Seyfried's always promoting the ketogenic diet, which I think is stupid. And I think the ketogenic is stupid because, for example, if you look at the papers by a guy named Lasanti. Lasanti wrote a paper about something called the reverse Warburg effect, whereby cancer cells were feeding on ketone bodies. And there's also reason to believe, if you study Krebs cycle in some detail, tricarboxylic acid cycle, you'll see that it can run backwards, and it often does in cancer. And it can be fed by glutamine. It can be fed by glutamate. So you're not going to win the game restricting glucose. Your brain needs glucose. You can't deprive your brain of glucose. You can have a brain dead patient. That's not going to be so good. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think the ketogenic is a smart way to go. And so why am I still laughing? Let me explain. Because I'm saying is they haven't blocked him from becoming well known, whereas they do, in my opinion, it appears to me a lot of people get sort of banned if they start promoting something that's too healthy. Because they let the people do the ketogenic diet because I don't think it works. You understand what I'm saying? Is if it worked, the guy would be, they would hide him from the public somehow. So anyways, from my understanding of nutrition, and I studied it a lot, I wrote an entire book on cancer biochemistry. A ketogenic diet doesn't make sense to me after a pretty detailed analysis of it. So, and anyways, too, he gets slandered a little bit on Wikipedia. Not that bad. Dr. McDougall gets slandered really bad on Wikipedia because he's, cured the most people, any doctor who ever lived. So anyways.
It's funny. This just made me think of an article I was looking at. Let me see if I've got it here. Dang.
Oh, actually, I got one more thing too on biopsies if you want.
Go. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the deal on biopsies. When you stick a needle into a cancer, you stir up the cells. Now, normally cells will release cancer cells into the blood anyways. By the time a cancer cell is about a centimeter, the size of your thumbnail, it could release 1 million cells into your blood every day. And your immune system is what removes those. But what Seyfried is saying is when you stick a needle into it, you spill cells all over the place, and you can increase the stage of some cancers from a stage 2 to stage 3, for example. And he thinks that increases the risk of the patient dying of metastatic disease. Okay. Now that's debatable. I can also tell you, in standard conventional medicine, you're always going to get a biopsy, virtually always, because they want to subtype the tumor. They want to establish the baseline diagnosis of it before they give chemo or surgery or radiation, which are pretty toxic therapies. So they're not going to want to do that. A radiologist can tell you got lung cancer by seeing a 2-centimeter nodule in your lung, but he can't tell you what type it is. It could be an adenocarcinoma, could be a squamous cell carcinoma, could be a large cell carcinoma. It could be a small cell carcinoma. And that can be a guide to therapy. So you're always going to get a biopsy with conventional therapy. If you're just going to treat with dietary therapy anyways, like let's say you have a probable prostate cancer based on a PSA. Well, if you're just going to treat with diet anyways, then why stick a needle in there and risk injury to your prostate, to your sexual potency, and et cetera, and have pain down there? Okay, nobody wants a big prostate biopsy needle. They take a whole bunch of samples up the rectum. Okay, no, it's no fun. So anyways, if you're going to go with a dietary treatment anyways, though, do you really need a biopsy? That's kind of what he's saying. I'll just leave it at that.
And this is the article that I was looking at. I just found it here. it's fun. It's doesn't really relate exactly to what we're talking about, except that it explores kind of the double standard in treatment and medical treatment. Of doctors often refuse aggressive or cancer treatments themselves or end of life interventions that they push on their patients because they prefer quality over quantity for themselves. They see, what happens to people that are getting these treatments, and they did a whole survey here on doctors and what they would accept and basically what they would reject in their own health situation of an end of life, at least medical intervention. They would reject CPR, dialysis, ventilation, surgery, feeding tubes, antibiotics. They would all accept pain medications. Anyhow, it's just, I found it just kind of amusing.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add to that, because it goes right with what you're saying, like Dr. McDougall said, he said, good luck finding a cardiologist that would allow a stent to be put into their artery. Most of the cardiologists are plant-based and they exercise a lot. Okay, stents are kind of for chumps.
Right.
And there's a little bit of that attitude in general too. Same thing with open heart surgery, a CABG, coronary artery bypass graft. And part of where this is coming from is the idea of standard of care. So everybody likes standard of care. We provide the standard of care. Like that's something to be proud of. And you don't understand. The standard of care is designed for that alcoholic, intoxicated, unconscious person in the emergency room. Okay? It's the lowest common denominator. Now, sometimes standard of care is the same as ideal optimal therapy. But the point I'm making, for chronic disease, standard of care is what the chumps do. Take a bunch of pills, get fat and sick, it doesn't work, and then they go for surgery. What the smart person does is they say, I want something better than the standard of care. I want optimal care. Well, the optimal care for coronary artery disease has become a low-fat vegan with no oil, the Esselstyn diet. Okay, the optimal care for reversing type 2 diabetes initially is the same thing. The optimal care initially for hypertension, all you got to do is minimize your dietary fat intake, your sodium a bit, your high fructose corn syrup, and you'll probably fix the problem. You'll fix your weight too. Why go for bariatric surgery of all these problems? So what I'm trying to say is always ask yourself, is optimal care better than the standard of care? Can I get that? What is that? And there's where your best outcomes come. Don't be tricked by standard of care.
Beautiful. All right. Last question here. Says, I understand that fiber turns into short chain fatty acids. This is one of the ways your body gets fats it needs. If you're low fat vegan, I know the butyrate also helps with tight junctions. My colon was removed due to colon cancer 5 years ago before I changed to the Spartan diet. Does the fiber conversion to SCFA still occur? Should I supplement because I don't have a colon?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question, because I would assume you're going to have gut bacteria sort of taking up, the distal small bowel. It's going to change, but I don't know how much that happens. But that would sort of be the question. Does the distal small bowel take on the previous function that the colon used to? I would bet you that it does, but I don't know.
Interesting. Well, we've gone over 2.5 hours or close to approaching that or something. Dr. Rogers, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and going through this. We have unanswered questions we'll put into the next session, but we got to do it again. Thank you for all your time and expertise. And what was your thought? How did you feel about it?
I thought it was fun. It was a motivator, got me to a little bit energized, some of these questions. And I got a lot of old notes. I was digging through my old notes, my old books, and it's kind of good. When you're asked a question, it focuses you. You gotta
definitely
get it straight what the answer is.
It's great stuff. So I got to figure out whether to have people give them in advance, because I know there was a whole lot of comments and people asking questions that I didn't get to just because I got these other sources that I'm, using. Have to figure it out the best way the next time we do it. We are definitely going to do it again if you're up for it. Thank you so much, Peter. And
my pleasure. Thanks.
I think we're going to call it here and just have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks.
Ciao. All right. Thanks, people. Thanks for tuning in.